Hello, whiskey folk. Right, Roy's not here. This isn't Roy's V Pub. I'm sure you've probably noticed already. No Roy's V Pub tonight. The poor man's not well. First of all, before I do anything else, I would like to wish him a speedy recovery. Hopefully, you can all see and hear me. Because if you can't, this is going to be a long night. Yes, it looks as if you can. So what I'll do is, before I go any further, I'll just do this and then I'll be back with you in a moment. I'm back. Right. I'm going to do something else here. I'm not as technically minded as a lot of other folk out there, so I just want to check something. And you may get a moment of echo. Hopefully not. If you do, I will sort it. Now, as long as I'm not perfect. There we go. Because this means that I can see the live chat going on. Right. Here we are. It is St. Patrick's Day tomorrow. That did say Jim's Monday Malt Samples. I probably should have changed it. It is Jim's Monday Malt Samples on a Thursday night. There. How Irish is that? That's a good way to start. St. Patrick's Day tomorrow. So earlier on today, this is how this came about. Earlier on today, I text Roy Duff, he of Aquavite, of the V Pub, to say, get well soon, my friend. And Roy very graciously texted me back and said, thank you. Do you want to take the slot, as we'll call it, tonight? As in, do you want to, and I suppose to a certain extent, we all do know this now, or most of us would know this as Roy's slot in the week. I mean, the V Pub every Thursday night. I thought it was, I had already sort of thought about it, but I didn't know whether to do it or not. I sort of thought to myself, well, I had a busy day at work. Tomorrow's St. Patrick's Day. It'll be a busy day tomorrow again. Thought about it, and in the heat of the moment, I said, you know what? Yeah, I will. I'll do that. So it all happened very, very quickly. So all of this has happened very, very quickly. So I'm hoping that it doesn't appear rushed. I would like to think that I know Roy quite well now, and that he's a good friend. He's very, very good at this. So this might not just be as polished as your general V Pub, but we'll get through. We will get through. Cheers. Touch of the Irish. Get me into the night. I'm going to get into the chat. First, you will see anybody who doesn't generally watch my channel, The Whiskey Novice, will see me doing a lot of this zooming around. It's because you're there, but my screen's there. So I'm going to go into the chat here first and have a quick look to see who's in. There were an awful lot of people in early doors. Thank you very much for joining me. Hellswed was in earlier. Jimmy Legg was in earlier. Jimmy, I think Jimmy Fest in September is a goer, definitely. Anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about, Jimmy Legg is coming over from Nova Scotia to Scotland for his trip in September. So I think there's an awful lot of us planning to meet up while he's there. So I'm really looking forward to it. Papa Q, Jerry, how are you, my friend? Martin Fielder, Pete Head, Frank, always good to see you in. Jimmy Jazz, Gerben Blocker. There's going to be a lot of names who are new to me here. But they're, we know each other. I'm convinced we know each other. We know each other. Sugar Kitty, always good to see you. I'll just scan down quickly. Greg's Whiskey Guide. Hi, Jim, and everyone. Hope to find a seat here and get me poured a Kilkenny to start with. Maybe with a whiskey chaser style. Yep. Shot of Bushmills on the side. Good man, Greg. Molasses Mike, how are you, my friend? Tim Hoekstra. Tim, there was some channel you were in earlier on as well, I think, and that missed. Falsgraph, how are you, buddy? So there's a few Whiskey with Molly. We will see Whiskey with Molly Ben later on. Danny Heaventon, as I said, new names to me. Rob Halford stepped up. I messaged Rob earlier on. I needed somebody, I needed a spanner, and Rob stepped up. So thank you, Rob, for that. Derek McGrainer. The list goes on, and as I said, a lot of these people was going to say new, but they're not necessarily new to me. David Owen, you know, there's a guy that I know well. Bevo Byrne is a new name to me. Rob Smith. Let's see, there's Gav's Whiskey Drams. Always good to see you, Gav's Drams. And Fernando, yes. Michael Henry. Michael texted me just before sending me a picture of what he's on tonight. He's got a bottle of Black Bush out. He had, what did he have? Bottle of Black Bush, bottle of Jameson, the 18-year-old it looked like. I didn't look too closely at the picture. And a Redbreast, 12-year-old cast strength. Good choices all. Christopher Malloy in, The Dark Side in, Jolly Rover. Great to see so many people in. Julian Rickman, that is a new name to me, but he's saying, top man, Jim, thank you for stepping up. It's the thing about it is this is an honor for me, an honor and a pleasure. So the chat skipped down a bit there. Jay Francis is in. Good to see you, buddy. Jeff Whiskey, nice to see you. Andy Cross. They'll keep coming in. As long as you flag at Whiskey Novice, I'll see it out of the corner of my eye. And if there's anything that I feel sort of should be said or needs to be said, of course I will say it. So the plan tonight, I know Roy's plan tonight was peated whiskey. Peated whiskey. I'll actually drop this in now just to get it out of the way early. Irish whiskey. Most of you, I think, in the chat, most of you are in here tonight already know me, probably know me well enough from my reviews or from the channel to know that Scotch whiskey is still where my heart lies. I, in the middle of last year, anybody who doesn't know, started working in an Irish whiskey shop. Lord knows you should know because I talk about it often enough. But I started working in an Irish whiskey shop, selling Irish whiskey, only Irish whiskey. But I still can't help myself but tell people that I prefer Scotch whiskey because it's where I started. There's more, this is just me speaking personally. I still think there's more variety in Scotch whiskey, although we will get on to a certain style of whiskey later, which you will not find in Scotch whiskey. But it's just, yes, Scotch whiskey, I think, is where my heart lies. And, but that's just me. That's just me. So getting back to the peated thing, there are literally, you could count in a couple of hands the amount of peated Irish expressions. They are there, but they're not plentiful. And when you do get one, I haven't yet had a peated whiskey that would stand up to a good peated Scotch whiskey. I haven't had a peated Irish whiskey that would stand up to a good peated Scotch whiskey. Now, this isn't me taking over Roy's plans here for tonight. He has only postponed that episode. He will be back with the peated episode. But what I mean is that as somebody who likes peated whiskey, I've yet to find one until, and this isn't it, but this is the producer. Waterford have just late last year released a couple of peated expressions, and they were I tried them at the distillery and they were proper. They were bang on. But and setting aside our views on Mark Rainier, we're talking about Waterford here. Setting aside our views on Mark Rainier, these were good in my impression, to me. These were good peated whiskies. But then as I did say to them in Waterford, and I've said this before, really they're making a Scotch whiskey in Ireland is the way I look at it down there. I know there are those who would debate that and argue with me and say that I'm wrong. When I said that to them down at Waterford, in my impression, you're making a Scotch whiskey in Ireland, they sort of sucked air through their teeth and went, nah, not really. But I mean, just personally, the way I look at it, that's what they're doing. But that's just one side. Personally, don't think there's a peated Irish whiskey that stands up to a good peated Scotch whiskey. Just personal opinion. So what I'm going to do here is that gets the peated thing out of the way. And remembering that peating of whiskey started in Ireland. Now that's what they're telling us. That's where the history boards are telling us, that the peating of malt began in Ireland. Now that's going back. So this is what I want to do first. I want to start with that and say, right, let's go through a bit of Irish whiskey. Anybody that was coming in tonight expecting a chat about Scotch whiskey, I'm sorry to disappoint, but we'll talk about. I want to talk about a bit about Irish whiskey, past, present, and future. And I've poured myself a wee dram. Now I haven't got any. I'm not pouring old whiskies. But what I've actually poured myself was this is an old name, believe it or not, McConnell's Irish whiskey. And I was actually given this bottle today by one of their brand ambassadors, and I'm going to openly say it, that I don't think this is me selling out. But if somebody's going to give me a free bottle of whiskey and say, here, take it, enjoy it, I'll quite happily do it. And it's a 5-year-old blend. It's sourced whiskey. But what I want to talk about is the name. And it's not just McConnell's. McConnell's were a Belfast distillery called Cromac. So it was Cromac Distillery in Belfast, and they weren't the only one. There was 4 distilleries running in Belfast at the time. And I'm actually, get the beard out of the way, Dunville's was another one. Dunville's were the second largest distillery. They're actually the largest distillery, I think, in Ireland at the time, and operating in Belfast. So there was 4 distilleries, and that was only Belfast. There was Dunville's, there was Cromac producing McConnell's, there was Avenel, and there was Con's Water. Now, here's an interesting fact for you. Out of those 4 distilleries, 2 of them, Con's Water and Avenel, were grain distilleries. So as much as the history, and a lot of us have spoken, and I was guilty of it back in the day as well, we talked about Anais Coffey and the coffee still, and how the coffee still didn't get taken on by the Irish producers, and it was the Scottish producers, the Scotch whiskey producers, who did take it on and sort of moved it forward, etc. Anais Coffey, a tax man, really, I suppose the way you call him. He was a customs and excise man from Donegal. Didn't invent the column still, but certainly patented it, and so it's still known to this day as the coffee still in certain parts. So back in those days, they were actually, I can tell you now that there was at a point there was 8 distilleries in Ireland, most of them in the north, who were operating with column stills, and only 1 in Scotland at a time, at that same time. Now, yes, that's just a snapshot in time, but a lot of what we've been told over the years about this, how Ireland didn't take them on, isn't necessarily true. It's a matter of fact, a lot of, and this one always goes down a bit funny, a lot of the grain whiskey that was going into Scotch blends at the turn of the century, between 1800 and 1900, a lot of it was coming from Dunville's distillery, Royal Irish in Belfast. So they were mass producing grain whiskey and shipping it over to Scotland for the use in blends. And it just changed. Whenever I only learned this fairly recently, but it changed my whole attitude toward a lot of it. As I said, very much into Scotch whiskey. It was a lot of learning. A lot of this history of Irish whiskey is new to me, and as I say, it has changed my mind. A lot of things. Dunville's themselves were, as I said at the start, the biggest in Ireland at the time, up until 1936, and they closed down. And you will see every now and again, and this one threw me a little as well, Dunville's Scotch whiskey. You will see this every now and again, and I couldn't get my head around it for a while. And probably there's probably a few of you out there already know this, but it was Bladnoch. They owned Bladnoch Distillery back in the early 20th century, and they were producing a Scotch whiskey. So it was Dunville's Irish whiskey and Dunville's Scotch whiskey, and the same goes for McConnell's. Cromac. Cromac owned a distillery in Orkney called Stromness. So there was a well, it wasn't McConnell's Scotch whiskey. It's very hard to know. It's the same with Avenel in Belfast and Connswater in Belfast. When Bernard did his tour in the late 1880s, they actually turned him away at the door and wouldn't let him in. So when he was writing his whiskey history book, he never get into the doors of Avenel and Connswater. And the thing to remember is this is just Belfast. Whatever anybody ever tells you, and you've no idea how many times just a day, I hear this. People coming in and saying, the point to a bottle of Bushmills and say, the oldest whiskey in the world. I'm sure there's those in the chat will jump up and say, not only is it not the oldest whiskey in the world, it's not the oldest whiskey in Ireland. There you are, Michael Henry saying, big grain producer. And this is what I know, Michael, and I almost feel like as if Michael's watching me, because Michael's very into his Irish whiskey history. Big grain producers were in the north. A chunk of it went into Scotch blends, but also gin rectification and chemical industries at the time. And that's true. And the other thing to remember is that even whenever distillation itself made its way over here, it was for medicinal purposes. And I'm sticking to that excuse. So this is a good example. This McConnell's 5-year is a typical, I'm going to say, generic blend from Ireland currently, because it's sourced whiskey. There's no distillery there yet. Generic. Ben saying, very, very good point, Ben. Have you seen YouTube before? Michael Henry is literally watching you. And yes, Ben, thank you. Thank you for that. We'll see you later. But so Bushmills, as I said, not only not the oldest distillery in the world, it does say 1608 on the bottle. 1608 was the year that the license was granted to Phillips. Was it Charles Phillips of that area? Was granted the license to distill spirit on that land. They didn't build a distillery until 17. Now, I always get these two mixed up. I was 1784 or 1787. I think it was 1784. But Kilbeggan Distillery in Westmeath started in 1757. I think it was that way around. So Kilbeggan were the first distillery in Ireland. Yeah, I said generic blend, typical, sweet, slightly sharp. Dark Side's asking, is that non-chill filtered natural color, Jim? I would say it's not. It's chill. It's a chill filtered blend, and it may well be slightly natural color, but it's just atypical. I would put it above Bushmills Original. I would put it above a lot of other entry level blends. Before I go off, and I'm not doing this for anybody's benefit but yours and my own. This is also from McConnell's. This is the sherry cask finish of the same blend, bottled at 46%. And I defy anybody out there. I bought this because I tried a sample of it at something. I can't remember what it was. And I defy anybody out there that if this were set down to you blind along, and you didn't know whether you were drinking Irish, Scotch, whatever, I would say most people would say this was A, Scotch, and they would say B, that it's a sherry bomb, a good Scotch sherry bomb. And it is. I absolutely love it. And it's very, very affordable. And I think that it's reviving a name. Now that almost does sound like as if I'm selling out to McConnell's, but I'm not. I'm definitely not. The distillery will appear this year in Belfast, and it's putting Belfast back in the map, as is Titanic. Titanic Distillery opens at the end of this month in Belfast. So at its height, remembering that in the late 1800s, Irish whiskey was the big boy. It was the big dog. Because the American market was drinking Irish whiskey, it was the one that was still outselling Scotch whiskey. And then through a series of events, it all went wrong. But at its height, there was still only 30, and somebody can correct me here, but there was 30 something distilleries in Ireland. That was it. There's now 40 something. So there's more distilleries now, 40 something, and opening at a rate of knots. So there's now more distilleries in Ireland than there ever was. But they will never be the power that they used to be. Scotch, what happened was that whenever Irish whiskey was on its ass, so to speak, Scotch whiskey had that lifeline go and was growing. So as much as in the mid 20th century, there were two distilleries, mid to late 20th century, there were two distilleries operating in Ireland, Middleton Distillery and in the south and Bushmills in the north. It was 1987 before Dr. John Teeling opened Cooley Distillery. So all these, in that time, Scotch whiskey was just growing and growing and growing. So there's, there will never be the power that we are. Let's face it, it's still India that rules that whiskey world regarding sales. So we'll never be the power that we were before. But, it's... So the way I describe it is two things. One, here at the moment, Irish whiskey. So I was talking about that's a bit about the past. I could and I might, because with time, we're here for a while. We're all comfortable. Might go into where the collapse started and why Irish whiskey stopped being the power that it was. Well, you know what? I'll dip into that now because I sort of lost my train of thought anyway. A lot of stuff happened in the early 20th century. One of the biggest things was David Lloyd George, who was the Prime Minister at the time, was a teetotaler. In 1915, the Immature Spirits Act was brought in across the UK, remembering that at the time, all of Ireland was still under UK rule. So when that Immature Spirits Act was brought in, these distillers who were technically just releasing whiskey off the line, you could bottle your whiskey if it was aged for 3 years. Jamesons themselves had this great promotion and all about aging for 3 years to perfection. That's 3 years aged to perfection. Nowadays, we're expecting 10 years is young to us, 12 years is young, 15 years is young. So you're into the 18s plus before you start to feel like as if it's getting any age at all. So when that Immature Spirits Act was brought in, these distillers were sitting on stock that they couldn't sell, and they almost went into meltdown. So straight away, that was one of the first things that happened. Then the war happened. Then the First World War started. That didn't help. The Civil War in Ireland certainly didn't help. When the country was divided, basically anybody who was dealing with the UK as they were sided with the UK and wouldn't buy from Ireland. So that cut off an awful lot of what was going on. And then Prohibition in 1920. So it was just one thing after the other in Ireland. And when Prohibition came in, one of the things that happened during Prohibition was bootleggers started making bootleg hooch in Ireland, in America, and were putting labels on it that sort of replicated Irish whiskey because that was what people were used to drinking. And this bootleg hooch that they were making was obviously of a very, very poor quality. So People were convinced that what they were drinking was Irish whiskey, but what they were drinking was bootleg hooch, and they didn't like it. So when Prohibition stopped and ended, and Scotch whiskey was coming back, they just Scotch whiskey became the thing. It was more interesting. Cutty Sark was already getting slipped over the border from Canada to America. It was released during Prohibition, and it was a good one. People discovered that they liked it. So Scotch whiskey started up, did well on the way back out of it. They were doing better. So the Scotch whiskey producers were buying up the Irish distillers and closing them down. So therefore, nobbling the competition. Sorry, I was just reading one of the comments there. So that's pretty much, that was the death knell for it. And over a period then of the 20th century, from pretty much from Dunville's was one of the last, 1936. Dunville's closed down, the only distillery still in profit. But the Board of Governors didn't see a future in Irish whiskey, so closed it down. They were one of the last ones still holding on. They were still putting out whiskey with their name on it right into the 1950s. David Owens just signing off. I put you to sleep, David. Greg saying great Irish whiskey. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate that. So yes, it was all a very sticky time. As I said, 1980s, there was 2 distilleries operating, Bushmills in the north, Cork, Middleton and Cork in the south, and both owned by Irish distillers. Irish distillers had started up in the sort of late 1960s when Powers couldn't exist on their own anymore, Jameson couldn't exist anymore, Paddy couldn't exist anymore, so they all basically fell under one umbrella in Middleton. And it was, as I said, 1987 then, before John Teeling started Cooley Distillery. And pretty much, I would suggest, and I'm not the first person to have said this, but I think it's easy to say that John Teeling, it was pretty much the father of the rebirth of Irish whiskey. That's the way I would look at it. Fair play to him. Michael Henry saying Coleraine closing. He's right. Sorry, I forgot about it. Coleraine closed in the 70s. But it's sort of, Coleraine was already falling under the umbrella of Bushmills. And it's funny because there's these distilleries now. There are whiskies that are popping up. There's whiskies that are popping up to like Cumber. Old Cumber was a prime example. The Cumber distillery closed down in the 1950s. It was the 1980s before they decided to level the distillery. And when they did so, they came across was one cask or a couple of manky casks, and these casks they bottled up, and these are a prime example because they say on the bottle, this Old Cumber whiskey, at least 30 years old. And the reason it says at least 30 years old is because they don't know exactly what age it is. Sorry, Royce said why no super chat. I don't know why I have no super chat. I should have a super chat. Anyway, we'll not worry about it. So this and I think Old Cumber was a prime example of one that it spent 30 years in these manky casks, and they charge now. They're selling this Old Cumber that they released is selling Jimmy Legg has just given me a little addition to the bottle. Thank you, Jimmy. What do you mean no super chat, Roy? Super chat. Thank you, Jimmy. Very much appreciate it, my friend. So yes, this Old Cumber was a prime example of stuff that was never going to be a good one, for the simple fact that it had spent 30 years in casks. It just tastes of oak. It simply tastes of oak, but they're charging. You can buy this stuff. You can still buy it on the secondary market, and you will pay 300 to 500 euro. I'm saying, because generally I'm looking at Irish whiskey auctions, 300 to 500 a bottle for this. Now, whenever they bottled it up originally, Danny Hebbington is just saying, cheers for saving the day. Danny, very, very much appreciate it, sir. Appreciate that. Um, Whenever they bought this stuff up originally, there was, I think it was about £90 a bottle they were selling it for. Now they're selling it for £90 a dram in most bars. And I would dare say that anybody who's paying that is sorely disappointed, because it's not good stuff. It's not good stuff. There was no cask management involved, and it was proof that cask management is required. You can't just leave stuff in a cask, bottle it up, and make it be okay. So that was Cumber Distillery. Michael said it a moment ago about Coleraine, and he was right. Coleraine were another example. There's a Coleraine 34-year-old out there in the wild, another one that sells for a ridiculous amount of money, and it was the same idea. Barrels bottled up after quite a bit later, and fair play. Fair play. Pardon me. So that's a brief look at Irish whiskey history. With Irish whiskey now, and I say this a lot, and I stick by it in my impression. And to me, Irish whiskey is in a state of puberty, is the best way to describe it. Just before I go there, Aquaviti, Roy has added to the ball fund. Roy, thank you very much. Page refresh. This is why we need Jimmy Leg Fest with Jim in attendance. September 30th, folks. So we have named it. I didn't want to say too much earlier on. Glasgow. Thanks, Jim. Thank you, Roy. Yes, looking forward to that. I have my flight booked. I have my room sorted out for the 30th of September for Jimmy Fest. Jimmy Jazz has been over a few times, and it got me thinking about this, about why there was never a Jimmy Jazz festival. It's just a thought. But so Irish whiskey, very much in a state of puberty at the moment. I think we're still looking 5 to 10 years before we see what Irish whiskey will be. Here's a good example once again, and let's pick another one. No, let's not. Let's stick with McConnell's for now. But they're all of these sourced whiskies who are sourcing from wherever. Anybody's curious as to what sourcing is, basically, well, it is what it says. They get their whiskey from somewhere else. Now, how they do that, how they go about then releasing a bottle is a different thing, because McConnell's 5-year-old is a prime example. Hinch, a new distillery in Northern Ireland from Ballynahinch, have a 5-year-old, and a 5-year-old blend. McConnell's have a 5-year-old blend, both sourced from the same place, but different cask management. They do taste different. So yes, as much as, and I'm going to pick up on it. Ralphie did a video a few weeks back. Maybe a bit of a sore point, but we'll get into it. Andy Cross has just added to the ball fund. Coins arrived safe and sound, mate. Andy, I'm so glad to hear that. The yellow one looks great. Thank you, Andy. I got more coins posted off recently to patrons, so any patrons who are waiting on coins should have them soon, if not already. So I'm glad you got that, Andy. Where was it? Sourcing. Yes. Ralphie did a video recently about sourcing, and he didn't as much as hint at it as he said it, that he thought it was a little deceitful. Now, I can't argue with that, because deep down inside, I still find deceitful wouldn't be the word that I would use, but I just disagree with it. How the question I always ask is, how do the Scots do this? In Scotch whiskey, it's happened once that I know of where whiskey was sourced. Somebody's going to remind me who it was. It was one of the island distillers, and it escaped me today, and I still haven't remembered who it was. And they released that bottle, While You Wait, I think it was called, or something along those lines. And it was basically a case of they'd sourced their whiskey, sourced spirit or sourced whiskey. I don't know whether it was Rassy. There you go. Ben, appreciate it. While we wait, and that is the only time I can think of it happening. Certainly in modern times, I can't remember another one. Now, I understand, we all understand that these distilleries have to keep the money coming in. They have to So they have to be able to pay for what they've done. Drew, my friend, with your Irish heart, from my Irish heart, very much appreciated, buddy. Drew's just added to the ball fund. Thank you, buddy. And Jimmy Legs saying, it's a very shitty practice because Americans do. Well, MGP are a prime example. We have our own version of MGP. It's not even MGP anymore. The word MGP, but they call themselves something else now. Donald Rance has just called it Great Northern Distillery. It was Cooley. It was before that. It was Bushmills. There is Bushmills spirit in the wild. Here's a prime example from the very whiskey shop that I work in. The Friend in Hand. He says openly, prompting you. But that is old stock from Bushmills. And what happened was when Diageo owned Bushmills, they sold off millions of litres at one point. Now, I've heard two different stories as to where it went. One story says John Teeling got it. Another story I heard from the horse's mouth was that Kieran Mulgrew of the Quiet Man got it. And Kieran himself told me that. David Hong has added to the bottle fund. David, very, very much appreciated, sir. Thank you. So I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to say where that came from because I don't have facts. Kieran himself from the Quiet Man told me it was him that bought it. Either way, it made its way out into the wild. There are bottles around now. There's one released just recently to Heathrow, a 33-year-old, I believe, Bushmills, old cask. Currently the oldest Bushmills in the wild, to my knowledge, and it's probably selling for a ridiculous price. And I haven't looked this one up, but it's a old stock. Bushmills, when Diageo had it, even when Irish distillers had it, they were selling off old stock. Falsgraf saying, I think the specific Irish approach to independent bottlers makes it easier morally for Irish distillers to source stuff. And I agree. Falsgraf always describe it as independent bottling. But the difference being independent bottlers in Scotland, generally we know them as single cask bottlers. So literally you're banging out, small numbers in the low hundreds at best. Whereas what they're doing here in Ireland, sourcing is they're blending. Basically, they're just buying this up in bulk to blend it and sell it as their own whiskey. Nothing illegal in it. It's completely legal, but it is just what it is. It is just what it is. Aquaviti's asking, he's listening. Hope there's a quiz. There is a quiz, Roy. There is an Irish quiz. I'm told. I have not seen the questions nor the answers, but I'm looking forward to it myself. So yes, and Donald Rance has said Napogue Castle was another prime example. One of the first prime examples, Napogue Castle, when the gentleman bought the castle, found casks of Bushmills, bottled it up, sold it off. There you are, bingo. So it's going on. Gin, vodka, they'll do anything they can. Dingle are a distillery that I haven't mentioned yet, down in Dingle, in the Dingle Peninsula. Dingle did it right, in my opinion, and I love their spirit. I love what they've done. Now, they called it, they talk about their founding fathers, and this was basically, they sold off the promise of, that's the only way to describe it, they sold off the promise of casks. Yet again, there's a lot of them doing it. Hinch do it. Lear are the latest one. I'm saying Lear, it's Glens of Antrim Distillery. And personally, it's not for me, but it has worked for someone. It's worked for Dingle. And I know it's happening in Scotland as well. Jimmy Legg saying it's the branding that bothers me, just as in America, calling an old family recipe that maybe it's once, but now you just source it. And I mean, I can't agree more. This is the bit that annoys me too. But I think part of the issue is that we're whiskey nerds. We are the whiskey community, and this sort of stuff annoys us. It doesn't sit well with me personally. But what can one do about it? There are distilleries. There are a few. You could handpick Irish distilleries now and say that's their own spirit, that's their own spirit. They produced this, etc. Some of them are very, very good at it. Some of them are finding their way. The bigger issue I have, and this is another one, I'm going to keep coming back to McConnell's because it's the bottle that I have beside me, which is, I know, sourced. It's the obvious answer. That they've built. What do you do when you this distillery is in the process? They haven't even built they haven't even added their stills yet. So they've got a whiskey on the market. It's been there for a while. As good as it is, or as bad, whatever you think of it, doesn't matter. If they grow a fan base based on that whiskey, but don't release any of their own whiskey, spirit, matured, aged spirit for another 5 years, in that time, so you're getting into 6 to 7 years then that they've maybe built a fan base and they're adding expressions in, taking expressions out. That's 7 years is a long time in the whiskey world. And you can build and lose a fan base in that time. When it's their own stuff, are they going to make it taste the same as that? Or are they just going to completely wipe the slate clean and say, right, let's start from the beginning? Dingle, because Dingle did it to me the right way, as I put it, the thing is then they can toy with expressions. Waterford are another good example. Waterford are releasing. Waterford went from releasing, we're going to release half a dozen balls and that'll be it, to releasing one a week, it would appear, and every one of them different. But that's another story. But once again, it's their own spirit, but very young. There's a youthful thing about it. You can taste that youthful thing about it. I still think we need something to hang our coat on. An Irish whiskey. Generally, when it comes to it, when I'm buying Irish whiskey, when I'm spending my money on Irish whiskey, and I'm going to pour one of these in a moment because I fancy something that I can trust, I still buy Powers John's Lane, the 12-year-old. I did manage to pick up, I know an awful lot of people were looking for this but couldn't get it. The Gold Spot, I did manage to get my hands on a bottle of Gold Spot. Middleton, or Bushmills. There's another one. Sorry, Redbreast 12-year-old cask strength. For me, it's Middleton all day long as much as I can. But if I'm looking for single malt, I'll still look to Bushmills. So there's another subject that we haven't even touched on yet. I did say at the start, and I'm going to move this on a little and get my guests in here very soon because they're starting to look a little impatient. I can see them in the background. But there's a couple of things. One, and I just seen a little thing out of the corner of my eye, and it was from Roy Aquaviti, and it was a little money bag. And there's one thing for a start. It's Irish whiskey prices always seem to be that bit more expensive, in my opinion. Now, once again, distilleries in Scotland waiting their time, wait till their stuff's ready. Even when you look at the likes of Ardnamurchan and these new distilleries here, here's how we'll get our money back: is we'll produce an A1 fantastic whiskey, we'll release it at the in the way that the whiskey enthusiast likes it. And there's a term that we'll have to remember here, that it's what's weird. Ardnamurchan, I'm still convinced, isn't for the general public. They haven't released anything yet to the general public, in my opinion. It's so far it's been for the enthusiast. Yes, they'll have stuff in there. I'm sure at some point they'll have stuff that'll be for for everybody. But so far, everything that I've had from them has been pointed at us, in my opinion. Age stated stuff. We'll have to start and look then at what we're going to get age stated stuff. So when you look at these new Irish distilleries, Dingle, I was very surprised. There's a distillery there that's now 11 years been open. They waited their time. They waited 3 years, and then they started putting out batch releases. Some very, very good whiskies in those batch releases. I was very surprised that they didn't do. They haven't waited and even released a 7-year-old by now. I seen somebody had posted there earlier about having tried the Sawain last week from Dingle. which is their new wheel of the year. It's the Celtic Wheel of the Year. Sorry, Jolly Rover has added to the bottle fund. Sipping my favourite John's Lane 12-year-old. Good man. And learning a lot about Irish whiskey tonight. Thanks for saving the day, Jim. Get well, Roy. Jolly Rover, thank you, buddy. I don't know your name, but I'll just call you Jolly. Why not? So it's one of these things that age stated whiskey. So as I say, Dingle have started doing this Wheel of the Year thing, the Celtic Wheel of the Year. They've released the Sawayan. They're going to do they've released the Bridie. Heard it called Bridie. It's St. Bridget's Day, basically. It celebrates. So it's. I just want to see if you're going to put out your own whiskey, if you're going to do it right. Give them an age statement. Give us something we can hang our coat on. So I'm going to pour myself a John's Lane, and then I'm going to start and invite some guests. Jimmy Legg asked them a moment ago, guests? Well, I don't come empty-handed anymore, Jimmy. You know me by now. You very rarely see me without the Highland Battalion in tow. Now, they're not all in the night. Some of them are in the chat, I've noticed. Some of them will come and go. But I'm going to quick scroll through the chat and see if there was anything I missed. And then, because they say they are looking a bit impatient sitting in there. Graham Brown, Graham Hunting, I've spotted a bottle of AD released in a local corner shop. It's not for the public yet. It's very close to that point, and it is. But Ardent American are still. Who did I see in Irish whiskey this week? Short Cross released, and one of my guests later was asking the question of, has anybody tried this? And it's a release from Short Cross, and I like what they did. Short Cross, it's their own stuff. David and Louise, is it down there in Redayman Estate, have been toying about with different grains, etc. So Short Cross released the Ryan malt. They've been doing the things, messing about. Somebody asked the question, what have you got for the public? Because what Short Cross were doing was releasing pretty much high-end stuff for, yet again, for you and I, for the whiskey enthusiast. And in fairness, in some cases, they were charging for it too. But now they've released this, and they're actually going to use the words dirt cheap blend, these two blends. And I haven't heard yet, I haven't heard an awful lot back about them. But I quite like the way they've went about this, that, they've actually went arse about face, I suppose would be the best way to put it. And they've done their high-end stuff already. They're messing about with different grains and different variations and stuff. And now they've went backwards, and now they're releasing a couple of blends, and I think a single malt's coming as well. So it's just, it's something a bit interesting. So, going to bring in guests. Now, the first one I'm going to bring in, I'll do the same thing as I always do. I'll bring them in. I'll not tell them who I'm bringing in first. So it keeps them in their toes. But I'll bring in, let's see, Al. How are you, mate?
Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you all right. You were the most impatient looking, so I thought I'd bring you in first.
I wasn't a bit impatient at all. I was just sitting there thinking that, God, you're a fur-out windbag. Can I have your lungs?
No, you've been promised Nigel's lungs. We've already discussed this.
Oh, definitely not dreams. No, I get there what you were saying there about the Irish Whiskey Bonding Company.
It was you, of course.
Me. So that sort of gave me a wee bit of an idea that you were coming in. Where is it there? The Grafter.
So this is a blend. There's two, the Grafter and the Creator at the minute, isn't there?
Chancer,
that's what it is.
I do like what they say here.
Which part am I looking at? Because I can't read that. My eyesight wouldn't even be able to read that if that ball was in front of me.
Our whiskey is born in Belfast, and just like the city, it goes well with a splash of water and tastes better when mixed with crack. But be advised that any mention of adding ice may get you turfed out in your ear.
And that's a picture of Biddle's Bar on it. So that would, right. just about sum that up. There's a story of just before I go into this, Andy C has donated to the Bottle Fund. Loving the history backstories. Great night, Jim. Andy, very much appreciate it. Bittles Bar, the picture on that, I know it looks funny. It's just a sort of pointed building, but John Bittles, who owns Bittles Bar, is renowned for if he doesn't like the way you're going about it, he will just turf you out. Would it be right?
Oh, he's a good lad.
Like always good lad.
Like when we met down there last year, and I was the first one in. Like he actually gave me a couple of free ones and some ones that people had given him, because you're having a wee bit of crack with him, and he can enjoy the banter, and he loves what he does, and he's easy to talk to, and it was just an experience for me, because I was in a place where, well, I think I'd only been in it once before. And, well, it didn't name drop like some big ZZ Top looking fella. And that did help,
John doesn't know me. I'm convinced. Does he?
Right.
There you are. But there's a great story about John we've told quite a few times. Now, I'll just drop it in here very quickly. There's a bottle called the Middleton Pearl. It's 30-year-old anniversary bottle, and it went on the market at 11,000 a bottle. Now the thing is, money's a funny thing, because money's, when you talk about numbers like that, it's ridiculous. 11,000 for a bottle of this, and then it got to the point where it was selling for over, and it's still selling for over 20,000 a bottle for the Middleton Pearl. John got one bottle, and he was getting a builder to make a cabinet for him. And when the builder was making the cabinet, he broke the bottle, and it was they're all hand blown glass, so they were. And this is true Bill, and he now has the broken bottle in a cabinet in the bar somewhere with a letter from Middleton saying he's got the most expensive broken bottle of whiskey in Ireland. And you got to feel for the man. Now, when I heard the story, I've heard different versions of the story, but somebody said that John disappeared for a few hours that day, and said they didn't know where he'd went. And I suggested that I know where he went. He was off burying the builder, because I know that's what I've been doing.
Right, well, you can see the point that, given the Northern Irish thing, what's not very often the bottle's broken in Belfast without a bit of petrol in it, but the
Irish whiskey, mate. I know Irish whiskey. You were you were a bit like myself, where you started down the bourbon path first. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, but it was the Wild Turkey 101 that really got me into. Like, I had been sort of dabbling a wee bit with a bit of Irish and a bit of Scotch, and there was nothing really hitting the point for me, and that was because my cousin, I used to drink vodka, and my cousin used to come and give me a wee, like, teachers. God, I hate that stuff. It really put me off. And then I got a wee sample set when I started getting more into whiskey, and a Glenkinchie 10 sort of hit the spot for me. And then I started getting more and more into it. And it is a wee bit strange, because when you think about it, like Wild Turkey 101, it's a big proof, for somebody starting into whiskey. It just really hit the spot for me. And I'm like, God, this is nice. And then I got really into the bourbon side of things. I've got a lot of bourbons. And then I thought, you know what? This is just showing me that, whiskey is not generic. There's lots of flavor profiles. There's lots of different tastes, lots of different smells. And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to expand out, start to, try like Scotch, Irish, other world whiskies. And it just made me actually realize just how much of a big industry it is, and the fact that it's like not all whiskey is the same, and it's just really, and many people, unless they're whiskey enthusiasts, don't actually realize that. They just, like, as I say, I've said to me many times, I say to the wife, here, take a sniff of that. And
whiskey. Sounds like whiskey.
And it's just, you really have to get into it just to see that. And I have another mate too who likes whiskey, and he started following the channel there a while back, and he said, vanilla, strawberry, caramel. What the hell are you talking about? I'm just like, if I like it or don't like it, you know. But
Well,
that's,
there's nothing wrong with that either. Like,
it's like Coke, Pepsi. Everybody has their own thing, their own taste profile, and their own preferences. But to me, looking back where my journey has taken me up until now, you'll never have a proper appreciation of whiskey unless you try to expand your palate, expand your horizons, and try different things. Because, like I always say, I could review a whiskey tomorrow and say, not fussed. Go back in another 2 years and think, you know what, that's bloody nice.
couldn't agree more, mate.
I know it's the bottle opens up, but you can't. Like somebody said to me last night, sent me a message on my last review. Was like, was that a knack pour? And I went, no, I don't do knack pour reviews because you don't get anything from them. You have to let it open up. You have to spend a wee bit of time with the bottle. And I always say when I do a sample review, this is just based on the sample. It could be much better once you let it open up, And like your good self, I'm drinking Macallan's.
The thing is too that I find, and I've found an awful lot of people now, the bourbon Irish thing. There's a link there in that there's a sweetness, with Irish whiskey, which in a lot of cases is an awful lot more prominent, and it's because people have started Irish whiskey maybe down that blend thing, which are grain heavy whiskies.
Yeah.
And we all know that the blends exist in Scotland as well, but and I know, and we all know in here tonight, and I hear it probably more often than most because of the shop, is I don't like Scotch. It's too smoky. And it's one of my biggest bugbears. It just irritates the hell out of me because I actually used to describe it as 20%. Somebody told me recently the number is actually 11% of Scotch whiskies is peated. Michael Henry may actually know here a closer number to that, but it's just one of those things that twice they've had Scotch whiskey that's been peated and it's put them off for life. Fair enough, you can't argue with that. But the blends that the Johnny Walkers that we know all tend to have that wee hint of smoke in there, and no more. Even if it's just there, and no more. If it's not your thing, it's enough to put people off for life. And that sweetness, because it doesn't happen, as I said earlier on, there's not an awful lot of peated whiskey in Ireland. Then it's easier for people to just generalize and say, "No, I like it. It's sweeter. It's smoother." And it's that, and we'll have to just nod and agree and go, "Yeah, all right." And then what happens is that we discover whiskies like this, and we know that it's the stupid thing about it is slightly sweeter. It is smoother but that smoothness is actually on the palate rather than that's where we find it. And it's just there's nothing. I can't find anything in good pot still, and I'm generally talking about Midleton, that'll ever offend me.
Yeah. Midleton just hits the spot pretty much in every level. They've been around a long time. They do things right. They've got their method and madness where they play about with things. But when you go right to their core range, what's not to like?
Well, Jameson, Jameson would be my blend to go to in Ireland. Black Barrel. I know you and I are both on the same page there. We've said it so many times before that when we go out and drink, we drink Black Barrel, and we talk about expensive whiskey, but we drink Black Barrel.
Yeah.
Because it's affordable.
That's it, and it punches up. It really does. It's just that it's so much flavour in a low proof, but it just works for some reason. It's a damn good whiskey. Like
it's one of those things that we haven't even touched on.
Probably the best 40%er there is.
Yeah, And that was, as I say, I was just about to say there, it's one of those things that we haven't even touched on yet, was pot still whiskey.
Yeah.
And I may as well, I can do it with any of the guests in here. It's a matter of fact, I was gonna, but I'll not, because I'll save it for another one of the guests. Because I know that you have your opinions on Irish whiskey, and it's somebody else that's one of the other Highlands who probably, I would suggest, probably knows more about Irish whiskey than he does about Scotch whiskey. But I could be wrong there. But that's not to say that you don't. I'm not. Please don't be offended.
No. Look, I forget more than it. Like, I've got brain fog and all types of things going on. I can't even sometimes remember the wife's name, for God's sake. I just call her like, my wifey McKins or something like that. It's like, that woman that I see every day.
Yes, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. While it's fresh in my head, I'll drop you into the background, if you don't mind, and I'll bring that other guest in, and I'll speak to him, and then I'll bring you back later if you'll hang around.
Oh, of course I'd hang around. You don't want to look at me. I'm like a bad smell.
Very much appreciate it, Al.
I know. No worries, mate.
Speak to you soon. So I have another guest who, and I was gonna talk about something else in Irish whiskey, and I sort of stepped away from it. So while it's fresh in my mind, I will bring in Nigel. Now the thing is, Nigel, how are you?
Not too bad, Jim. Yourself?
Very good, thank you, buddy. If there's a lot of people in here from I will say this, if there's a lot of usual VPub attendees, they mightn't know you, Nigel. Anybody who's watched my channel now will know you. Anybody who is on Instagram will probably know you, Mr. Whiskey NI. But give us a quick description of yourself, mate. Give us your bio, Nigel, just before, and help yourself out to these people who are in here who don't know you. You have been in whiskey for quite a while now, I would say.
Yeah, 4 or 5 years or so. Sort of started off with just supermarket cheapies. Started off with that, built up from there, sort of went through them all. Started with water and ice, then was just a wee bit of water, and then just a neat, and then started doing tasting notes, and then buying more expensive bottles and just exploring. It was basically started off with Scotch whiskey, and then moved over to Irish, and sort of got stuck in Irish for a while, because obviously with the resurgence of Irish, there was more and more new bottles coming on the market. So I was buying them and trying them out and reviewing them, and putting them up on my Instagram page, and
that's mainly
sort of come full circle again. I'm trying to get back into Scotch again, so I'm sort of trying to do both now.
It's mainly Instagram that you do, isn't it?
Yeah, probably only Instagram I'm on at the moment. Mm-hmm. So a wee bit of
Jimmy Leggs saying 4 to 5 years, a long time, question mark. Well, the thing is, Jimmy, and I would actually say this, that 4 to 5 years might not seem like a long time, I suppose, to a lot of people, but you're a bit, I know, Nigel, because you and I have spoken, that we only started taking it seriously about 4 or 5, 6 years ago. Up until that, yes, we were still drinking whiskey, we were still enjoying whiskey, but we just didn't make a career out of it. It wasn't a hobby to us.
Yeah. Instagram about 4 or 5 years ago.
And the thing is, you're like, well, that's the thing. As I say, I suppose.
Listen, I'm not professing that I'm any kind of expert.
No,
Mr. Whiskey NI, it maybe makes me sound as if I'm the king of Irish or Northern Irish whiskey, but no, it's just that was the handle I came up with when I started. And,
no, I know that.
Same as yourself, I'm a whiskey novice. I'm just learning as I go and just telling people what I think of it. And you may agree or disagree, but at the end of the day, whiskey is subjective. And
totally
I think of it, maybe not the exact same as what you think of it.
No, totally agree. Daniel Williams, sorry, has just added to the bottle fun. Hi, Jim, on my way home from the SNWS tasting, from an SNWS tasting. Thanks for picking this up. Daniel, thank you for that addition to the ball hunter. No, and you've actually proved me wrong already, Nigel, because you said that you started with Scotch whiskey, and there I would have thought that maybe you were a bit like myself and Al, when you maybe, because an awful lot of us do start, I'm convinced, do start maybe down either the bourbon path or the Irish path, and then progress to Scotch.
No, well, it was probably a short stint in the Scotch, for like basically it was a Tesco's reduced range, you're getting your Glenlivet Founders Reserve for like 20 quid, and then maybe go on the next week and get a Lefroy 10 for like 25 quid, you know what I mean? And then it doesn't take long to get through that, and then you have to go looking elsewhere, because I suppose at the start you don't want to be spending too much money, then after a while you realise you're getting into this, and you 25 quid limit, you start to creep that up to 30, then up to 35, then up to 40, then every now and again, special occasion, 50 or 60, and it just sometimes gets out of hand.
Yeah. But the other reason why I wanted to bring you in here was we haven't actually touched yet on pot still.
Yeah.
And the fact that if asked, now, here was something else I haven't touched on tonight. I might leave this one for another one of my guests. But one of the other things I haven't touched on tonight was triple distillation, double distillation, that sort of thing that seems to be a line in Irish and Scotch whiskey. Pot still, to me, if anybody asked me what defines pot or Irish whiskey, I'm going to say pot still, because it can only be made here.
Yeah.
So it's something that we have, nobody else has. And it's not even that there's something, and I mean, it's stepping away from it a bit, going back. You, I know for a fact, go back into the production of whiskey very deeply.
Yeah.
We'll not set you aside here as to, but as in you look at the production of it.
Yeah.
Would it be right?
Yeah, I would do. Yeah. Was it 50% malted, 50% unmalted whiskey? Like it has its particular GI, like it has to conform to be a single pot still.
Well, not even pot still, but even just Irish whiskey in general.
Yeah.
Justin Wan has just added to the have a good one, Jim. Show Roy how it's done. Thank you very much, Justin. No, I'll not show Roy how it's done, but well, Whiskey Jason here is saying pot still is not only made in Ireland. Sorry. Well, where else? I'm going to ask Jason. I'm not being cheeky when I say it. Where else is it made legally? Because to my knowledge, it can only legally be made in Ireland.
Well, I think you can make it in other places, but you can't call it pot still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you can add any grain you wish.
Yeah.
But
you have the likes of Killowen there who are making technically pot still whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
But they can't call it pot still whiskey because the mash bill doesn't conform to the current GI set by Ireland, or for like they're bringing out a new one here shortly. That Barntuthil range, it's got I think it's 30% oats or something like that there, and because it's got a higher percentage of oats than is actually allowed under the current GI, it can't be called a pot still whiskey. It has to be called pure pot still or something like that there.
But that was Cologne, did you say?
Yeah.
Cologne, they're still Irish, so at the end of the day, it would still. But I mean, pot still.
But they can't put it on the bottle saying it's a pot still whiskey. They can't call it a single pot still. But it is technically a single pot still whiskey. But because it doesn't conform to the current GI set out by the government, it can't be called that on the bottle.
But what I mean is, right, if you do 30% unmalted barley, 30% malted barley as your basic, and then add whatever other grain you wish.
I think at the minute it's only 5%. You can only add like a 5% different grain. It has to be, say, 45% malted and 50% unmalted, and then 5% different grain. But if you go 10 or 20 of a different grain, that takes you outside the GI, and you can't put single pot still on your bottle.
Right. See, yet again, so this is why I'm glad I brought you in, Nigel, because I wasn't aware of that. I knew, as I said, because the old law was, as far as I was concerned, was it was 30% of one, and then they would almost offset it because it's at least 30%. So if you said 30% unmalted barley, then and then you said 60% malted barley, and then 10% of any other grain. You know, you could still offset it. Has to be distilled in a pot still.
Yeah.
You know, you can't do it in a column still. You can't. Well, you can do it. Obviously, you can do it in column still, but you can't call it pot still. And it's all about. A lot of this is all about what you can call it. I'm keeping a very close eye on the chat here to see if anybody's going to correct me, because I want to know if anybody out there actually knows the full. Donald Rance is saying the current technical file is 30%, 30% malted and unmalted minimum, and up to 5% of other grains. So surely then what they would do is they would be, as you said about Cologne, and you're right, if they're putting in
I think it's 30%.
Too much of another grain, well then
I think they're putting 30% in, which takes you over that 5%. You know, once you go beyond that 5%, if you get 6% of a different grain, you're getting to the point where you can no longer put single pot still on the bottle.
Yeah,
I think you can put pot still whiskey. Is it not,
the GI, here's a good one from Michael Henry. The GI is due to change to allow Cologne Blackwater mash bills. Think it will be 30 malted, 30 unmalted, and up to 30% other grains.
Yeah, I think those guys they've been trying this last couple of years to get that changed. They have been, don't want to say fighting with them, but like obviously trying to get them to change their ways, obviously to, you know, you would think like more expensive mash bills would allow for like better and more flavoursome profiles.
I totally agree.
More variation in the Irish whiskey itself. Like,
I'm going to have to look.
You think?
I'm going to have to look deeper into this, because this is throwing me off here. That there's an awful lot of people here saying that, like Jason saying, Tulnua Distillery in Arvada, Colorado, have a single pot still whiskey. For example, I'll saying Balcones have a pot still bourbon, but that's something different. The proposed, Donald Rance is saying the proposed new technical file is supposed to be allowing up to 30% of other grains as per historical practice with rye, oats, and wheat, which would make sense, you know. So then they're saying it's 30% malt, 30% unmalted. You can have 30%. Well, you would offset it then. You know, you can have at least 30% of one, at least 30% of the other, and at least 30% of the other, and then you can.
Yeah, so you get like 30,
or as much as 30% of other grains, should I say? There you are. It's and Michael Henry saying he thinks the GI has planned to change following the work of Finoan O'Connor on historic mash bills. Well, as you and I know, O'Cumber was, you know, that was Finoan poking around, and fair play to him.
Yeah, well, I think he's working along with likes of Brendan Cartier of Cologne and whatnot to help. I think Brendan, he is actually one of the big driving forces behind this change in the technical file, because obviously, like Cologne distillery, as you probably know yourself, like they're a small distillery and they're basically experimental stuff, and he's trying to revive. I know he's doing a lot of stuff with botching and whatnot, but he's also trying to revive old style types of whiskey, which the old mash bills of single pot still would have been probably 30% oats, and then, as you say, whatever it was after that between the malted and the unmalted.
It's one of those things that sort of leaves me, you know, this is the sort of stuff that throws massive spanners in the works, because it's to say it's unique. And as Jason's saying, Ireland never protected the term pot still whiskey as a product, but is only Irish. I don't know what he means by that. Scotch and bourbon are unprotected, but single pot still is only defined but not protected. If that's the case, why isn't everybody making pot still whiskey? Yeah,
like there's not too many. Is there any single pot still Scotch whiskies?
No,
I wouldn't have thought so.
There's not even, and I hark back to Ralphie, who said that he couldn't, whenever he was, and that's a mire, but he said it was a time back whenever he was reviewing the Redbreast 12-year-old cask strength, that the only one that he could actually think in Scotch whiskey that felt anyway, it's the mouthfeel of pot still whiskey that to me changes it. It's a much creamier, slightly peppery thing.
It's a really oily mouthfeel to it.
Yeah. and it's that when you go that path, he said, what was it? Damn it, I mentioned them earlier on. Lowland Distillery. Anyway, he said it was the only one that he could think of that suggested or felt like pot still, and I think even at that he was grasping at straws a bit. Tim Hawk's just saying Auchentoshan. No, Auchentoshan don't make a pot still. They just triple distill, but so do quite a lot of Scotch whiskey distilleries.
Which is they're the ones that do the double distilling.
Auchentoshan.
Oh, but in Ireland, like Kilbeggan, I think they double distill.
Aye,
they buck the trend, whereas Auchentoshan buck the trend in Scotland and do the triple distill.
There is, but that's another mire, and we'll get down that path in a moment. Every whiskey made, and this is from Jason, every whiskey made in Scotland that is not single malt is automatically a grain whiskey. But you see, therefore no pot still in Scotland. But I mean, Jolly Rogers or Jolly Rover said it was Bladnoch. It was Bladnoch. It was that Ralphie suggested might be a bit like.
Well, I suppose you can still make a single pot still whiskey in Scotland, but you just can't call it a single pot still due to the technical file.
See, this is the whole debate.
Yeah.
And I know Michael Henry, and Michael, fair play to Michael again, and I know his name comes up a bit. They've done a 70% malt, 30% unmalted barley mash through a column, taking off 81% strength. Impact of the unmalted barley on mouthfeel is huge. Will be bottled as grain at some point. And I remember Michael telling me that they were technically making a pot still in Scotland, but they were putting it through the column still, so it would never be a pot still as we know it.
Well, it can't be a single pot still because it's going through a grain.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Well, even to say it wouldn't be a pot still at all because it went through a column still. So look, we're down a rabbit hole here already, and that happened very quickly. And it's something that obviously more research needs to be done.
Yeah.
Because it's something that I'm still convinced that it's. I mean, Jason, I understand what you're saying, but to say that every whiskey made in Scotland that is not a single malt is automatically a grain whiskey. Well, yeah, but I mean, you're not taking in the mash. It's about the mash bill that makes pot still pot still. It's not how it's made or what it's made in. It's all about the mash bill.
How it's described in the bottle doesn't mean it's not. Like it might say in the bottle that it's not a single pot still, but it still could be a single pot still. It's just hasn't conformed to the current technical file that's imposed upon it.
Indeed. As I say, that rocketed out of control very quickly there, Nigel. I was surprised. Well done. You stood yourself well there. And it's definitely a mire, that one. And we're not done with that one. I'm convinced we're not done with that. So we're not, as in there's more to it than we know. I'll tell you what we'll do, buddy. We will move on, and I'll bring in another before this gets muddier. And,
no problem.
Thank you very much for speaking to me. I'll do the same as I did with Al, and I'll just drop you into the background, and we'll call you back in a minute, mate. Cheers, Nigel.
Cheers.
Yeah, that. Whew. You can make, right, here's Donald Rance. You can make single pot still anywhere really, as long as it is unmalted and malted barley in it. You can, but if that's the case, why isn't everybody doing it, Donald? That's my question. The same way you can make Canadian blend, and that's, I know this to be the truth, but if that's the case, why isn't everybody making single pot still? Why is it only being made in Ireland? Why are the Irish only the only ones using unmalted barley and calling it pot still? I know, as Michael said, and he's right, Michael Henry said, and I know this, that you can use that mash bill if you wish. Anybody can do it. But he wasn't, he was saying then they were putting it through a column still. Well, why isn't everybody else putting it through a pot still? I'm making pot still whiskey. There's my question. That's the way I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to bring in, and this guy, yet again, he lacked surprise because he doesn't know who I'm bringing in next. And just let's get his take on it, shall we? Let's get his the take of. Let me see. Can you guess because he chose to mute themselves? He's muted himself. It's Lee J. So there we go.
There we are.
How are you, buddy?
Very well, thank you. You?
I'm very well, and I think
You're doing well, mate. I'm enjoying this, and it's educational, which is nice for a Thursday.
Here, it's educating me as well. That's the thing. I'm absolutely loving the fact here that this is being called into question, because the whole and I'm not just talking about single pot still. Ralphie did this thing where he questioned this a few weeks ago, but he was granted. You and I we all chatted about this in our WhatsApp group, the Highland Battalion WhatsApp group, and it all got very intense there as well as to how this was all dealt with and how we're all talking about it. And the whole, I mean, I know people keep calling up the single pot still side of things. Well, single doesn't mean anything different in pot still than it does in malt. If it comes from more than one distillery, it can't be called single. It's that simple, Donald Rance is commenting, and this is maybe one of the things that's been said best. Unmalted barley is a pain in the arse to work with. Love it. More expensive to work with, and the pot still is more time intensive. It boils down to historic practices, really, in his opinion, which is fair enough. That's a good point. But I would just be highly surprised that, given the popularity of pot still in Ireland, nobody else was doing it if they were allowed to. There. That's the way I'm going to put a pin in that for now. An Englishman on Irish whiskey. What's your thoughts so far, Lee J?
I like drinking it. I still don't understand it. I still don't understand the whole.
None of us do anymore, it would appear.
I said if the flavour's there, I go in with Al earlier on. He said it was bourbon. I found some Scotch. My first real bottle of Scotch was Lafroig 10, and it was like, yeah, maybe not. So it went in supermarkets, and the cheap Jameson cask mates just jumped out, like the IPA and the stout. Love both of them. Then you got your Black Barrel and the Crested. Went down that route. Moved on elsewhere. But Irish is in the group chat. I've got a few. I'm enjoying it, and it's now the growth is booming. It's the fastest growing, I think, is it? Is the Irish?
Good chance. Once again, as I said earlier, we will never be the Irish whiskey will never be the powerhouse it was. Somebody asked, I remember somebody asking that question of me quite a while back about how English whiskey, because English whiskey is growing exponentially as well. But I think the thing is that because Irish whiskey already had a history, people were just, they're quite happy to go, well, Irish whiskey was already known of, but English whiskey is still a relatively new thing, although, as we all know, a very good thing.
Definitely, yeah. But with the Irish, I'm looking forward to. I've got a dingle with me tonight, and then it's the only dingle I've had, but I'm thoroughly enjoying it.
Is that the batch 6?
That is the batch, yeah.
Yeah, lovely stuff.
It's a good one. It is a good one. And I did with the age. I didn't realize they were. How are they? 7? You're saying 7-year-old dingle?
Well, the distillery itself is only it's only open 11 years or something like that. There, so I think roughly most of their stuff is sort of 3 to 7 year old. Really, what you're looking at, maybe slightly younger. Whiskey with Molly Ben is actually saying, yep, Irish whiskey sales are expected to overtake sales of Scotch in a few years in the US. Well, I wouldn't doubt that.
But I hope that's not down a proper 12, because that's not really very friendly, is it?
and the thing is, just because I've got a good sense now for going on for what the Americans, I'm generalizing when I say that, but in the same way that you and I know that there are whiskies out there that are made for Joe Public. And when I'm talking about the American, trying not to generalize or upset anybody, when I'm talking about the American market, and I guarantee that it's the same market that the whiskey with Molly's talking about. It's just sweeter whiskies like Irish blends seem to be more geared toward their palate.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair.
You know, you and I are out looking for bold flavors. We're out looking for stuff that are going to draw our attention, and when we know now that the American, that these things are making for the American market, when people like Bushmills release things like the Red Bush for the American market,
Yeah.
and it's a really sweet grain heavy blend, you know, and you just at that point where you go, well, you know, I understand that this is made for certain people. It's not for me. It's not for you. But
do you think it's like with all whiskey, it's the long term thing. If they can get their foot in the door with the sweeter stuff, and hopefully with the way that American whiskey is developing, that they are coming away from bourbon and they're going into single malts to grow their palates, like, you know, because a lot of the Americans, they love the Scotch, and if they can get their own, and it's like, would say, to going back to the Irish, putting their foot in the door with mass produced before they maybe introduce.
no, I know where you're going.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's yeah.
And the thing is that we as Al and I discussed, that the likes of the American market tend to lean on that sweeter edge of things anyway. So if you can get them on board, you're on a winner. You know, so if you know, almost blend your spirit, blend your whiskeys to that palate and try and you'll win them over. I just find it, for me personally, but this is the thing, that you and I are out looking for that flavor profile, but the Scotch whiskey tends to bring more so, and but that's you and I.
Yeah, and we're
yeah, we're a very, 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 I think we forget how small we are in the scheme of things. And the thing is that this is why I was saying earlier, I didn't want to generalize America, because there's an awful lot of Americans out there who want that as well. It just seems to be the you know, whenever you take a, what was that? We were eating dinner earlier on, and our son has a fashion for throwing facts at us whenever we're eating dinner. Generally, they start with, "Did you know?" And could you not just put it away for a minute? And he'll tell us something random. And he did something this evening, and my wife said something. And I know the doc's in here, and he could maybe set me right. But my wife says, "Well, did you know that there's more potatoes eaten in Germany than there are in Ireland?" You know, and this, it was one of these things, because, but as I said too, there's an awful lot more people in Germany. It's a bigger country for a start. So that, you know, whenever you take the populace, maybe that, so it's just it's one of those things that America, we are blown. I mean, the size of that country, America, Canada, and Russia was a massive market for Irish whiskey. Irish whiskey was getting bigger and bigger and bigger in Russia.
Oh.
And when the war started, they had to pull a lot of that market and say, that's it. We're not going to deal with you anymore. And that's just,
they had to find new markets, push it the other way.
Like, yeah.
I keep forgetting about Russia, but that's a whole new market, isn't it? And it's like you've got the Far East, Japan and China, big India. They've got their own distillery, but they love the whiskies. But I didn't realize about Russia. I don't know why that wasn't.
The thing to remember is, I suppose, India is still the largest selling market in the world. It's something like the top 5 whiskies in the world for sales are all Indian, and the last time I checked, and I think this came from the Malt Whiskey Yearbook, Jameson, people think about Jameson being this massive name. Jameson were this massive name, still are a massive name to a certain extent, but they're like the 10th biggest selling whiskey in the world. And this is after Johnny Walker. This is after Jack Daniels. This is after all those Indian releases, you know. So big as they are, and yes, as big as they're getting, they're still relatively small, you know. But the thing is, we're talking millions of cases a year, you know. It's you would still love to be earning a small share of that, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
but it was good to see. I'm glad. That's the thing. What delighted me was whenever I seen you posting the picture recently of the McConnell's sherry that you'd bought a bottle of. I know you've saved it because this week you've been doing Irish every day in the lead up to Paddy's Day. And the thing is,
big out in tomorrow.
Well, this is it. And St. Patrick's Day, you know, I don't know whether I mentioned earlier on, but St. Patrick's Day, you know, I always sort of look at it as keep it in America where it belongs, you know, and leave us alone. And at least the Irish pubs will be a bit more empty on the day, you know. But don't get me wrong, I suppose that like we're glad of the income and all that there, but it just gets a little out of hand, even in my opinion. I would certainly, were it not for the fact that I worked in an Irish whiskey shop, would not be outside. I would not be outside. Full stop. Actually, I would just lock myself up indoors and spend my time with my whiskey. It's this thing where being Irish seems to be incredibly. I was going to say popular. Seems a bit weird to say that. You know, it's Paddy's Day, like, but I was delighted to see you, because that buying that McConnell's is taking a punt. You know, you're taking a chance on something that's not necessarily. So I'll be very interested to know your thoughts when you open that tomorrow.
You'll be the first to know. That's for sure. Yeah, I'll be straight on. What have you bloody turned me on to?
Yeah, I know. It's just one of those things that simply because I think it's just this wee sherry bomb that I think they've done very well. I recently, as the weekend, tried a whiskey from a Haskra distillery in Galway, and I tried it blind. They give us samples with a question mark on them, and I would have said myself and the guy who arranged it all, but we're chatting back and forward, and both of us said we're looking at a 10 to 12-year-old single malt matured in PX, or certainly finished in PX casks. And when we were speaking to the distillers themselves, they told us, no, it's actually a grain heavy blend. It was like a 5-year-old grain heavy blend with an Oloroso finish on it.
Oh.
And it just blew us both away. The fact that it
wasn't what
they created something that, and the McConnell's is the same to me, that they've created something that's just quite phenomenal for what it is.
So you're saying that they've sourced it, or have they just?
It's all sourced, and it was the same with the Haskra. It's I'm actually going to pour myself a dram of this in case I'm talking out my ass. But I just from memory, it's incredible stuff for what it is. And the thing is then that because it's a grain heavy blend, it keeps the price down. So you can get a good it's not, but it's definitely not a bad sherry finished. And as I say, just a little 5-year-old blend.
Sherry, I thought, I'm a sherry head. I got to get into that.
Like, do not let me. Well, you've already bought it, so don't let me sway you.
If not, you're getting the rest of it in the post. If I don't.
No, it's great. No. Do you know, because I've just had a John's Lane, and
love that one.
it's I don't want to feel like as if I'm disappointing you there, but no, it's good stuff. And look, I'm so glad to see that it's people like you. I know you've been in around with the rest of us here for a while, and we trust your opinion. So whenever I see you buy an Irish whiskey, whenever I see you try an Irish whiskey, I appreciate it, because it's good to see that here's the thing. I still very much behind Scotch whiskey, as I said.
Yeah.
I feel like as if I should have some solidarity with the Irish whiskey producers, being living on the island,
I know you mean. I'm
and,
the same with the English. I know a couple of your reviews where the sample nights, and you come across a couple of the English that's come across to you, and it's nice to see. Well, even with Roy, he's coming. That's really good. That's nice. What we do, we got competition, and I'm sure that's it. It makes you glad that you can share it, and someone else is enjoying it as well. But
the annoying thing is English whiskey is just very, very drinkable and very enjoyable. And I'm saying that's annoying. It's not, it shouldn't be annoying. But
No.
I mean, let's face it, mate. You and I are both rugby fans. We've both been open with each other about this. When it comes to
this weekend.
Yeah, that's the thing. When it comes to England, Ireland, and that sort of thing, there's a certain core in us that rises up, and that thing is also there. I'm convinced in whiskey, and it shouldn't be. There shouldn't be competition. And it annoys me is to say, literally, I'm looking at it and go, damn, these boys know what they're doing. These English producers know what they're doing. Fair play to them. And as I say, there shouldn't be a competition there, and I don't think there is. As far as English producers are concerned, they're not. They're not out there trying to compete.
I mean, they're just happy
anybody.
to get it out there. Yeah, definitely having to share.
But listen, I'll tell you what I'll do, EJ. I'll do the same with you as I've done with the rest of the guys, if that's all right, if you don't mind. And if you can hang around for the quiz at the end, please do. And I know the kids are always in the background, but I'll speak to you soon, my friend.
Pleasure. Good to see you.
Cheers. Right, I've still got a couple of guests, so I'm not going to race through this, but I still have to get a couple of guys in. So I'm going to add Ben in. Oh, hold on. There we go. There he is. Ben, yep. Thanks for waiting around.
That's all right.
You're very quiet.
Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you just about. Is it just me, or is it?
Oh, let me sit closer. Is that better?
Still quite quiet, but anybody else, if everybody else can hear him, then that's we'll see what comes back. I don't know, maybe it's just me. Sorry, something that did want to pick up on there just before I went too deep in. Donald Rand, no, it wasn't Donald Rand's. James Morgan just asked, was it James Morgan about the or if I skipped it, about the Powers Rye? Somebody asked. It was James Morgan. I've got a sample of it, James. Somebody or a friend of mine gave me a sample of it. There wasn't. It was released to the south of Ireland first before it was released to the north. It has just been released, general release, but there's not a lot of it about just yet. I got a sample, so I've just poured that sample just to see what I think of it. Anyway,
Jim, I'll tell you what. My sound's low for some reason, so why don't you bring your other guest in? I'll go and get a pair of headphones.
Okay, that'll do. Ben, thank you very much. And I will speak to... There he is. I've got a thumbs up because he knew he was there.
Hey, Jim.
How are you, my friend?
Doing well.
Now, I know Irish whiskey, and you said yourself, because I sort of knew this whenever this subject came up a few days ago, when we started to discuss my Irish whiskey, and you had told me quite a few times that your son was quite a fan of Irish whiskey.
Yep.
So it was more likely that he would know more about it than you, I think was the way you put it. But
yeah,
he ain't here, so we're talking to you.
No worries.
But you and the thing was that I know I was waving one about there earlier on, the gold spot. You've actually managed to find one close to hand.
Yes, that's a great story because one of the community whiskey and wine trails, Tom, happened to spy a gold spot at our local Costco. I'm not sure if everybody knows what a Costco is, but it's kind of like a wholesale club here. And to be honest, their whiskey selections have dwindled quite a bit from a Scotch and Irish perspective. It's more U.S. whiskey now. But he saw the gold spot and only $100, which I did a quick search online, and it's hard to come by. And over in your neck of the woods, it's a couple $100 is like the best you could find it for. So I felt really grateful. He picked me up a bottle. I believe he got himself one, and I based this on the sample that you provided. That was just awesome. So I was really tickled to get a chance to get a bottle.
I can tell you, my friend, that anybody wishing to make a profit, if they're buying it at that price, they will make a profit out of it easily, because that is cheap for that bottle.
Yeah, I was surprised. And it's as you know, I haven't had a lot of Irish whiskey, and what I had sampled before then, I think I'd only had one cask strength, which again I believe was from you, a Roe and Company.
Yeah, Roe and Co. Yeah, the port one.
Yeah, and I like that as well. So, I mean, that gold spot really, that's been the best. I really enjoyed it, and even with my limited experience with Irish whiskeys, I figured I got to get that bottle.
I'm cleaning a glass here to pour myself one. I've got that. I've poured myself the Powers Rye, and I'm just I'll let it settle a second, and then I'm going to pour myself a gold spot just to let it settle. And I've seen, I think it was Greg's Whiskey Guide, was it, that had mentioned it, maybe that he didn't know. I don't know, maybe I was wrong, maybe I missed that. But Powers Rye was some they just released recently. I don't know whether it'll be a goer or not. It's I don't know. It's not up to me, but we'll see. Greg's Whiskey. Oh, curious of that Powers Rye. Yeah, I'm curious as well, Greg, in fairness. But no, gold spot. And I did. I'll do a bit of name dropping. Billy Layton, the master blender from Middleton, was in speaking to us one day, and I asked Billy, will we see, because the chat was that Gold Spot would come back without the 135th anniversary thing on it, because it was the 135th anniversary of Mitchell's and Mitchell and Sons and Jameson working together at the time. He said that maybe the somebody had suggested that Gold Spot would come back without the 135th anniversary thing on it. And I asked that question, and he said, look, Gold Spot may come back. And I asked the question, well, what do you mean, just as a standalone 9-year-old? And he went, well, it might not even have a 9-year-old age statement on it. It might just, Gold Spot might just appear again at some point. You wouldn't know, which it's random on their behalf. I would rather it was sort of knew where we stood, because if I had £1 for every time somebody asked me, did we have Gold Spot for sale, I would have had enough money to buy a bottle of Gold Spot, because everybody was trying to get their hands on it. And Gold Spot, to anybody out there who doesn't know the Spot series, to anybody who doesn't know, I'll give you a quick rundown of the Mitchell story. Mitchells were bonders. Bonders is basically they store it's, you will see on some Irish whiskey bottles bottled and bond, same way as you'll see it in American, but it means totally different things. Bottled and bond in Ireland basically means it has to be stored in a bonded warehouse. Mitchells were bonders. They were wine producers or wine exporters. Couldn't figure out what to do with their barrels, so they gave them to Jameson after the disgorged the wine from them. Gave them to Jameson, said put whiskey in them, and the spot thing was them putting a dollop of paint of a different color to say, here's how long it must stay in there. So blue spot must stay in there for 7 years. Red spot must stay in there for 15 years, etc. Gold spot is not part of that series. Gold spot was released as a 135th anniversary thing. So it's just a sort of standing alone thing. There you go. Irish whiskey drink. Sorry, apologies.
Yeah.
Running away there. But you have had as much as not maybe as much experience of it, but you have had experience of it. Well, is there anything stand out in it for you that would make you want to go down that path?
Well, I think maybe I'm a little bit of a victim of where I'm at in my journey, because I've already kind of gone through some of the lower ABV standard scotches, and kind of, have got accustomed to those flavors. So when I started with Irish, I kind of came away thinking, okay, this is nice, but there's nothing jumping out at me that's really grabbing me. So that's why I think the cask strength helped with more, the bolder flavors. And I will say that I had a Killowen rum and raisin, a 5-year rum and raisin, which it made a mark with me. That was something I really loved.
And that's right. I remember you telling me that you were a fan of what Killowen were doing there, and fair play, as am I.
Yeah, it was a good one. But I'm just scratching the surface, and I would have to say the same for the U.S. whiskey scene. A lot of the bourbons and the whiskeys, what I did have were all kind of the same taste to me profile. So now, if there's something that has a unique flavor profile, it kind of grabs my attention. And so there's been a couple on the U.S. side that have done that, and I'm just starting to sample more Irish. And I think like the Gold Spot obviously is good. The Redbreast, I enjoy the Redbreast cask strength. And I've heard that the Lustau, is it?
Yeah.
That's
Lustau,
one that I'll probably try.
Lustau is a different sherry bodega, basically, that Irish distillers approached and said,
okay,
we would like to try your casks. Would you mind? And they were delighted. And it's a much sweeter kind of dessert sherry.
Okay.
Lustau. And but very, very, it works very, very well on a whiskey. It would be although one for the sweet tooth is the way I would put it.
Yeah, and I'm kind of in a phase now where I enjoy savory flavors. So I don't know that there's necessarily one out there on the Irish side that you would recommend that has kind of a creamy, salty, buttery flavor, but I mean, that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm still kind of recovering from that single grain experience that I had, where I just really loved that single grain. And so I'm kind of still focused on that right now.
And you're right. I mean, I would say I can't off the top of my head think of anything that taps into that herbal, more earthy thing that they seem to, and I feel like as if now Rob Halford's saying Waterford is creamy and savory in his opinion. Waterford is just youthful to me. It's generally you can taste that estery, youthful thing off it, and they'll get that out with a bit of age. And once again, if you are heading down that path of Waterford, the reason why it maybe is that bit because, as I said earlier on, you're looking closer to a Scotch whiskey made in Ireland. So it just once again proves that Scotch whiskey feel has that more slight, weird, funkier development of it that I'm convinced. And it's weird because the more I'm talking about this tonight, the more I'm convincing myself that Irish whiskey is just sweet and more, and then leans itself toward the sweeter palate, the sweeter tooth. and then it's understandable that the bulk of people and what will sell it in the end is just the fact that people enjoy a sweeter whiskey. Now, it'll never then compete to that funkier side of Scotch whiskey to those fans, but it will sell itself to the mass market who tend to enjoy sweeter, lighter, smoother whiskies.
Yeah. And I mean, my experience with the US market has been, I guess, the majority of it's been younger whiskey there too. I mean, there's a lot of newer distilleries popping up, and those are the ones that I seem to be trying. And, you know, maybe there's some way that they can accelerate the aging process, but for the most part, they still come across a little green to me. So maybe that's also something that we're witnessing over in the Irish market. Now, the Dingle, the batch 6, I really enjoyed that. And that's a little bit older probably than some of the stuff I had tried before. And, you know, I think at this point, it takes a bold flavor or a unique flavor to kind of to grab my attention. And, you know, I'm going down that path right now.
Yeah. And funny, I know that Dingle Batch 6 is it's the port finish, and I know I know Lee J mentioned it earlier on, I think it was, and it's just a great representation. And if, you know, there's a few people here actually, and fair play to them, you know, at least this is why we rely on these things, and the community at large, shall we say. Donald Rance is saying the Midnight Silky from Silky in Donegal, or from Slieve League in Donegal. Great savoury, sweet whiskey. In his opinion, Greg's Whiskey Guide saying, not sure, he totally agree with me. Fair enough. Greg always understand that. And I know Greg himself has always been a big fan of Irish whiskey. And Greg was one of those people I've a great appreciation for. Greg made me appreciate Irish whiskey. And he introduced me to a lot of the older Irish whiskies, the older Bushmills and things like that there, as did Tony Kane in here, your friend of mine, Tony, where you're pulled, but you need to be, the thing is then, what Greg taught me to discover, or taught me to, a lot of the bolder flavors come with higher ABV. And you and I have discussed this, Drew, you know, before, that just that punch comes with that bit of higher ABV, and then it comes with a big bold flavor that can steer, etc. Greg taught me, just through talking to him over the time, and through him sending me samples, to understand the flavors in the more delicate, and Bushmills were one of the prime examples of that, where everything in their core range is balled at 40% ABV. So if you need to then almost steer yourself to find these delicate flavors in them, and there's this real, you find this, and something that I always find in Bushmills, especially ones that they tend to mature slightly different. There's this is where their spirit shows through, where you find this weird black currant bulb or bud right at the very end. It's a very, very bizarre thing, that you think you're done with the whiskey, and you think that didn't bring an awful lot, and you find yourself sitting there an hour later going, I can taste black currant bud, I can taste cinnamon, I can taste this, I can taste that, and you go, that all came from that whiskey, but it just took it that long to hang around. And I think that's something about Irish whiskey as well, that it's when you dip into the more delicate side of it, sometimes that's when you find it at its best. You and I both, don't get me wrong, you, I, and probably the most of the people in here still want the big flavors, but it's the subtlety of the older and delicate flavors that are there that we just have to wait for, and sometimes they appear, sometimes they don't, you know.
Right. Yeah, and it kind of brings up a good point for me, because there's something I hadn't tried and I've been hearing a lot about, and it's not Irish, but it's Loch Lomond single grain peated, and I finally got a chance to try it, and that's one of those that it's not going to slam you with the big bold flavors or the high ABV, but what's there, I really enjoyed how well it was integrated and the subtlety of, I could hardly detect any peat on it, because I was expecting it to be very smoky, very peaty, and either my palate has got desensitized or it's just so well integrated that it doesn't really, raise its head that much.
Mhm.
And that's one of the few whiskeys that I feel I could dangerously drink way too fast. And I'm very controlled on how much I drink, but that's a daily drinker. And that's something that I think a lot of the Irish whiskey I have now, that I've maybe recalibrated a little bit, I'm going to go back to some of the Irish that I have and just spend more time with them. And I think I appreciate the whiskey a lot more when I do that, because a lot of times I'm hopping around from bottle to bottle and I don't really come back to the same bottle many times in a week or a month. But when I do, it's usually when I'm trying to finish off a bottle. And that's where I really feel like I can appreciate the whiskey, is because I'm coming back to it and I'm not hitting it like, once every 3 months. I'm hitting it 2 or 3 times a month at least. And that's where I enjoyed it.
Agreed. Lee J's checking out. Lee J, I could see you sort of hanging off in the background there, buddy. And I know I know you want to sign off. So Lee J, thank you, buddy. Very much appreciate it for stepping in tonight. I will speak to you soon, my friend. And yes, I agree with you totally, Drew. I agree with you totally. That it is about, sometimes I think for us all, it's about that reset, isn't it? It's we don't realize that we move around and we want to try and we want to keep moving. I think that it's in all of us to move forward. That it's just in everybody's. And I'm certainly not one for looking back. I'm not one of those people for hanging around in the past. I sort of think the past's in the past, but where whiskey's concerned, we can write off a whiskey very quickly and then sort of go, well, hold on here. Somebody else, all of a sudden, everybody's raving about it. And this is something that we've already written off, and you go back and you go, and then you sort of feel yourself, well, am I just going with the crowd, or do I still feel the same about that whiskey as I did? It's a strange thing.
Yeah. And my palate, I think my palate's changed a little bit over time too.
Oh, they do.
Which helps that.
Yeah. Speaking of strange things, this is the Powers Rye. It's quite a strange thing. It's very, very sharply floral initially. But it's quite nice in the palate, weirdly. It's not like a rye that I've had before, put it like that. But, Drew, listen, sorry. Thank you very much for joining us. And I know I've said as I said to everybody, there's a quiz coming up. I know you generally don't hang around for the quiz, so it's up to you. If you want to clock off, I will not be offended, my friend. But listen, thank you very much for joining us. As you said it yourself, I know you've said to me, because I know you've contacted me quite regularly about whiskies that your son was interested in, Irish whiskies. And I know that seems to be, more where his palate falls. I think it's safe to say there's good and bad in Irish, there's good and bad in Scotch. It's just we'll find good and bad in everything if we're looking for it. But it's always more to have an adventure in, isn't it? Really,
I agree.
you know.
I'm enjoying the journey.
Yeah, exactly. Drew, thank you very much, my friend. I'll speak to you later.
Thanks,
Cheers,
Jim.
buddy. Always good to have Drew in. I know he wasn't sure whether he was going to join in tonight or not, but it was great to have him in. Ben, we've been here for 2 hours, so let's get Ben back in again and see how this sounds doing. Ben, how are you?
Yeah, good. Sorry, hope you can hear me much better
Yep,
now.
no, that sounds clear to me.
Good. Sorry about that.
Ben, I sort of held you off to the end for 2 reasons. One, you arranged the quiz, so it was safer to leave you to the end. We've been here for 2 hours, which is pretty good for me, considering I don't generally hang around that long. And 2, I wanted to get your sort of feel. You commented to me earlier on before we even started that I think your words were actually, "Don't ask me about Irish whiskey. I don't know all it." But as I said to you myself, as an Irishman living in Scotland for many years, what's your feel on it from there? Does Irish whiskey matter? Does anybody care or notice it, or in Scotland, as from your point of view?
So, only speak from my perspective, but obviously, I grew up in Northern Ireland and just down the road from Bushmills. So, Blackbush and Bushmills was always something that even as a kid I was aware of, because there was people ordering it in the rugby club and places like that. But I only got into whiskey recently, and as you mentioned, I left Northern Ireland when I was 18 years old, and I'm now 44, so I've lived in Scotland a lot longer than Northern Ireland, and only got into whiskey relatively recently. And I had the same conversation with somebody about bourbon recently. Scotch whiskey is such a rabbit hole, and it's so wide ranging, and there's so much to learn and so much choice that Irish whiskey is just like, I'm massively proud Irishman, and you would think I would be all over Irish whiskey, but I've got over 100 bottles in my collection. When I looked at it tonight, I've got 3 bottles of Irish whiskey. There's just so much Scotch to go around and so much Scotch to explore that I just haven't done it. And it's not because I disregard Irish whiskey, and it's not because I don't like Irish whiskey. It's just I'm so far down this Scotch rabbit hole that I don't dare get into another rabbit hole of Irish whiskey.
And that rabbit hole of Scotch whiskey just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. It's not like as if that's what I meant even earlier whenever I said about when Irish whiskey was in the doldrums, Scotch whiskey was just growing and growing and growing. So it was never, it was already there. We were, in my opinion, and I know you actually commented earlier on and you said that Irish whiskey will outsell Scotch whiskey in I'm taking it for granted that that's a statistic that they've based on growth over the last, I don't know, many years or.
Yeah, well, so I did the VPub Irish quiz last year. And one of the questions was about Jameson's. I think Jameson's, if I remember right, sells like 92 million bottles of Jameson's worldwide. And as you said earlier, I think that makes it the 10th best selling whiskey. But, lots of people in the chat were saying about, Americans just have the Irish as their sort of second culture or in their heritage or whatever, especially the Eastern Seaboard. And just the projection of Irish whiskey. But again, in the comments, people made a lot of comments on it's easy to move from bourbon to Irish whiskey. And that sweetness that is in Irish whiskey, again, is also really easily attractive. Whereas I fall into the camp that probably a lot of us are, in that I'm a whiskey geek and I like challenging whiskies. And I drink a lot of whiskey that I'll go, yeah, that's nice, but it's all right. Yeah, it's nice, but it's all right. It's not challenging. It's not, it doesn't, blow your socks off. I also very rarely buy a bottle of whiskey twice. So just because there's so much to explore, right? I kind of feel like I've been there, got the t-shirt, done it. What's next? And the way whiskey has went recently, you know, we're so far beyond core ranges. You know, there's all the limited edition stuff coming out. Sometimes you can't get it, but you know, again, we talked about budget tonight as well, and I do stick to you know, a good budget on that. And I'm not, well, for a start, I don't have the money to be throwing it up the wall on expensive whiskey. But there's just so much. I mean, every month there's like, I try to limit it, but there's every month there's stuff coming out, and it's not about FOMO. I've left FOMO behind, but it is just about, God, I really want to try that.
Yeah, no, agreed. And the thing is, you and myself and the Highland Battalion, as we are, you know, this was something I mentioned earlier on, that there's somebody that asked about joining the Highland Battalion. But it was something I think that I mentioned about the fact that FOMO is something that pops up there quite a bit. You know, if it never goes quiet for very long, basically, in that WhatsApp group before somebody is saying, "Oh, here, did you see what's just been released?" And that could be in any whiskey. That could be from anywhere in the world. That because we all have different interests and where our whiskey comes from. And funny, I was talking earlier on. I've been talking all night about sourcing, etc. And this is quite interesting. This is Glasgow. This is Malone's triple cask Irish whiskey. Now, this guy landed in me one day, and this is actually Irish whiskey. This is a pub in Glasgow, Malone's pub, and they've made a thing about being an Irish whiskey pub in Glasgow. This is sourced from Pierce Whiskey in Dublin, but this just seemed very weird to me. Somebody who I would describe myself as being a bit as Irish as pizza, basically. You know, as much as I live in the island of Ireland, and I'm becoming more Irish through whiskey because of my job, but it's just one of those things that this just seemed weird to me, an Irish whiskey pub in Glasgow. But if, you know, it's a major city in the world. It just sort of proved to me that Irish whiskey is starting to get its way back, to sort of worm its way back in there into people's minds, if nothing else.
But so I mean, we're both Irish, so we can say this with probably green tinted glasses on. But Irish whiskey has that one thing that a lot of other than probably Scotch don't have. You know, certainly has it over English whiskey, Irish whiskey. Like Indian whiskey, Australian whiskey it's Irish. I mean, you know, you walk into anywhere in the world and say you're Irish, you get welcomed with open arms, and you know it just has that thing that people tend to warm to it.
Richard Agnew calls himself a sanitized Irishman. I like that. I'm going to claim that, Richard.
That's a good one.
A sanitized Irishman. So you've been, it's basically take us to one side and wash us. But no, it is weird. You're 100% right, and it's one of those things that, you know, the old that's the old adage, isn't it? You know, if it weren't for alcohol, the Irish would rule the world, and all this here, all those old jokes. And I think the thing about it is, it's personality. An awful lot.
But look, I don't mean to swear on your channel, Jim, but look at the popularity of Proper 12. There you go. It's just, but it's a marketing.
You were going there for a moment.
But it's a marketing thing, right? And it's, you know, fair play to the lad. He sold however many millions of bottles around the world based on a absolutely pure marketing thing. I remember however many years ago when it came out, I was dying to try it. And this was before I was into whiskey, but just because I get caught up with the whole marketing thing. And I remember I think it was in Tenerife or Lanzarote or somewhere like that. And I saw it and I was like, oh, you've got Proper 12. Give me a drink of that. And I was like, oh, that's really disappointing. And that was even before I was into whiskey. I just didn't like it immediately.
Do you know part of the sad thing about that is, somebody actually mentioned Dingle. while it was, and I just caught it out of the corner of my eye. While it's a bit sad that the good producers here are all washed up in the same thing. They're all mixed up in that same pot. That's Irish whiskey. Could anybody tell a good one from a bad one? Then it's Irish whiskey. Hey, let's just hang on to that.
But do you not
Yeah,
think
again.
like guys like yourself and Roy and Ralphie and everyone else on YouTube, like just have this massive part to play? Because until I get into whiskey relatively recently, whiskey was whiskey. I did not know or understand the differences, the maturations, the different ways you can make whiskey. There's just, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but most people are massively uneducated on whiskey, and they'll go, "Oh yeah, I don't like whiskey because I had Bell's once and I didn't like it," and therefore there's a whole range of stuff out there they've immediately discounted.
But the problem, I generally won't touch Irish whiskey for the simple fact that most of it's sourced at the moment, and I just have this inner thing that won't let me review sourced whiskey, that it's somebody else's. That's the way I look at it. I'll be reviewing somebody else's whiskey or somebody else's spirit or whatever way that has come from one place to the other. And I do every now and again. I did a month of Middleton. I'll maybe do more Bushmills, but even Bushmills just starts to, unless you delve down in that path of the. So I agree with you totally. Once again, I mentioned it earlier, Ralphie made a whole mess of it recently, in my opinion, and I'll not dwell on that too long, but he did. And it didn't work out. We've hit upon something here tonight about the pot still. Hell, I thought I knew Irish whiskey. It would appear I didn't. There was stuff said there the night, but yet, that being said, it hasn't really raised its head again. It was everybody brushed it aside there very quickly, the whole pot still thing, because I don't know whether the facts there. I'm going to have to dig into that a bit further and see what the genuine facts are behind pot still whiskey. And yes, Ben, and I appreciate it. I agree with you that whiskey in general is a very, and Al said it earlier on, whiskey can be whiskey to some people, and the annoying thing about that is, I have had this question asked of me fairly recently: do you never just enjoy a glass of whiskey? And that's a very good point. You can delve in too deep to the point where you care about what the yeast is. You care about that's the thing for a producer. That's the thing for that's for the thing for somebody that is producing the stuff.
But you do, Jim, because you proved earlier. You know the story you told earlier about you guys going out and just having Black Barrel in a bar, and you're talking about great whiskey and that, but you're just enjoying a Black Barrel and you're just sitting back with some mates and enjoying it.
Thank you. You actually picked up.
I was listening, I was.
And you reminded me, Ben. Well, thank you, because as I say, I do, even in working in the shop, I do go into it a bit deep, in that I can't just go, that's a super wee whiskey. And that's that means something to I'm scared to say it in case he ever does watch this, but the guy I work with, don't get me wrong, love him, absolutely love him. But I mean, people will come in and ask, what's that like? Super wee whiskey. And fair play to him, he'll sell a hell of a lot more whiskey than I will, because if somebody asks me, what's that like? It's dreadful. Don't buy that. And that's not the right attitude to have for somebody that works trying to sell whiskey, but I just can't. I'm not a good liar for a start. And if I know the background of a whiskey and I know that it's not great, I can't. I just deep down in me, I can't make myself say, it's good. It's you should buy it. It's. But what you do is, it's evangelism. You steer them elsewhere. I wouldn't buy that. I would try that. Look, that's even cheaper. I've done it, and I do it quite regularly. Yellow Spot from the Mitchells. Yellow Spot's a prime example. Love Yellow Spot, but it got too expensive, and so I steer people toward John's Lane instead.
I think you can't take the price thing out of whiskey, but to make a weird analogy for a guy that's got guitars on the wall behind him, for me, it's a bit like music, right? You know, I grew up, that's the wrong word. I went to a student house where you get put in with people you don't know. There was one guy that lived with me who was all about the source and the journey of the music, like hated manufactured bands, and it was all about, you know, people in their garage playing together and this, that, and the other. And I was like, but is it not just about whether you like the sound of it? Like, you don't have to like the band or the story or whatever, but when you put it in your ears, do you like the sound of it? And he was like, no, it's not about that. It's about the whole journey and story and stuff. And in some ways, that's a bit like whiskey. It's like when you put it in your mouth, do you like the taste of it? Right? That's the bottom line.
100%, Ben, and that is actually one way that I've used in the past to describe whiskey was music, and that, you know, that with a little tweak, with the change of a chord, with the change of a tempo, that's the change of a yeast, that's the change of a, you know, that's a dent in a still, which will, you know. So yes, you're 100% right, and do you know, it's. Let's face it, if it wasn't for us being nerds, we wouldn't be here. So we wouldn't be, you know, breaking this down. Look, there's 2.25 hours. I've never done this. Jim's getting tired. I've never done this.
You still get 66 people watching you.
No, and I'm very, very appreciative of it. But we still have a quiz to go as well. So tell you what I'll do. What would be the easiest way to do this? Now, do you drop in because you see, you would generally have this sort of.
Well, I'm going to share my screen and we'll see whether it comes up. Or
what you do is you do that, and then I'll drop in anybody who wishes to take part in the quiz who's still in the green room. Give me a thumbs up. Al has given me a thumbs up. Nigel's given me a thumbs up. I know, Ben, you said yourself that you'll not be able to, well, you know the quiz. You'll not be taking part. I'll be taking part.
I got a 10 tonight.
Yeah, you got a 10. Yeah, of course you have. I'll not be taking, or I'll be taking part, but Drew, no. Drew, no. I know Jenner doesn't. So that's fine. That's all right. So I'll tell you what I'll do. I will add Al, and I will add Nigel, and we'll draw. Let me see now. This could all go horribly wrong here because these things just. And what will happen is that once I add the quiz, then Ben, you take over as such. All right. I'm going to say that I'll still be talking through it. Somebody else can keep an eye on my score, because if I'm throwing up letters, I'll not care. So if there's still 62, we're dropping numbers, but there's a few people about. It is, what is the time? We've done all right. There's 11:15. That's about the time Roy would usually be hitting the quiz anyway. So we've done all right there. So let's do it, shall we? So Ben, technically now you are in the background, but you are in charge. So we'll still hear you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you can still see me as well. So
I can still see you. So as long as you're happy, don't make any stupid moves, any sudden moves, because you can't see yourself. But
no,
let's do this.
I've got myself on my phone, but it's on delay. So, yeah, just to apologise to Roy, because I've used his template, as you can obviously see, because I had to pull this together at very last minute. And I'll also apologise if there's any mistakes or any answers wrong. But, well, it was very last minute. So let's go.
And that's very much appreciated, Ben.
I know, Paul.
Exactly.
Okay, so I think this is, if you've listened tonight, I said to Doc earlier, McAllen finding there, if you've listened tonight, you should get this, no bother, maybe apart from the asshats, but we'll see. So, question one, nice easy one to start us all off. Teeling's single peated grain whiskey is released under which brand name? Is it Blackbush, Black Pits, or Black Barrel?
Right, that night, in fairness, when I read, I did this question flashed up earlier on, but I didn't see it caught me off guard. But I think, and now that I read it, I know where we're all going. And I think even though there's not an awful lot of people left in the who's watching, but we all seem to be going roughly the same direction. So we'll go. Al and Nigel already have their answers up, and I would have been going the same way. I will say B, the Black Pits.
Yep.
And so do most of the people in the chat.
Yep, and you would be correct. Nice, easy one to start us off.
I still haven't tried it.
No, neither have I actually.
Me either.
And it's available locally just down the road. Did you get my finger right?
It's just, and they've actually put out a cask strength Black Pits as well, which I would quite like to try, but I just haven't got around to it.
Yep.
Probably better option.
Okay, so question number 2. Which distillery is situated in the former Guinness Power Station? Is it Teeling, Roe & Co, or Pierce Lyons?
Diageo, of course.
Hold on. What the fuck is this here?
Just hanging back to see where everybody goes with this.
Oh,
Diageo, I've sort of given you a bit of a clue there toward anybody who's listening in. Diageo, there was reasons why Diageo shifted Bushmills when they did. A lot of that was to do with what is it called? The cream liqueur. Again, that escapes me. The very famous one.
Oh, Bailey's.
Bailey's. A lot of that was to do with Bailey's.
You have a bigger B than me, Nigel.
What, sorry?
You have a bigger B than me, Nigel.
so, Jim, what are you saying? We've got 2 Bs down there. What are you
Did
getting?
you guys throw your answers up, did you?
Yeah.
I missed it. Most people seem to be going toward B, Roe & Co.
Yep, the answer is, of course, Diageo's Roe & Co.
George
back in
Roe,
Dublin.
of course.
Absolutely. Okay. So, question 3. Which distillery has released expressions called Gaia, Brimlands, and Ballymorgan? Is it Clonakilty, Waterford, or Glendalloch?
How are we all going with this? This seems to be
The guess for me.
Nigel's got his B up. Al's
I
got
go
A
RC.
up.
I
Yeah,
haven't a fucking clue.
I go for B. Based on Ballymorgan, I believe there was a Waterford, Ballymorgan, and Gaia.
That
Most
is
people go.
Is this a recurrent theme?
It's
correct.
a recurrent theme. It seems to be. He's going to throw us, Nigel. He will throw us.
correct. It is B. It is Waterford.
Never heard of any of them.
Greg's whiskey has got 3 for 3. Greg's doing well.
There you go, Greg.
Sorry,
Tenors.
sir.
Rover 2 for 3. Danny Heberton 3 for 3. Simon Oliver 3 for 3. Molasses 2 for 3. So you're throwing a few people here.
B.
Now let's see. So there's a banana skin here. This is kind of half a banana skin.
Ah, man.
But what is the most westerly active whiskey distillery in
Active.
Ireland?
What I say.
Is it Achill Island, West Cork Distillery, or Dingle?
You know what? Well, I'm on the other side.
This is a banana skin.
It's Achill Island, not on the other side.
No, Achill Island's west.
It's definitely west.
Fuck.
You may be thinking
It's
of
going to be an A then. Because I remember, oh, Jesus.
I think we're all going different, aren't we?
I said A.
I'm actually going to go West Cork. I know it
So-
says West in it, but
Yeah. So Jim's slipped in the banana skin. West Cork is
Yo!
pretty south. It's not really that west. Achill Island is northwest of Ireland, but it's not as far west as Dingle Distillery.
just Dingle out in the Dingle Distillery or out in the
On the-
Dingle
Dingle
Peninsula.
Peninsula is much well.
Quite
it's
a few
actually-
people. Quite a few people did go with that because the one that would probably, and I'm going to go back here's a bit more history for you. I'll throw in the one that was probably the most westerly back in the day was Inishturk Beg.
Mhm.
which doesn't exist anymore. It was never an active distillery. The guy never made a distillery out of it, but most of them aren't. That one seemed to throw quite a few people. Although, well, there's a few
Shoulders
people
right
here.
there.
I would have sworn it was Achill Island because I remember back about 22 years ago when I was in the lifeboat crew in Kilkeel, Achill Island had a new lifeboat and they were bringing it back from England and they had to go round past us. And then they hit a big wave and one of the guys came out and broke his jaw and we had to go out and guide him into the harbour.
All right, keep it light, Al. Keep it light.
Well, what it is, it just brings back memories. I always like to keep things like.
Okay, question 5 is the picture round, and I'm simply asking you, what distillery is this?
No.
Is it Cooley? Is it Hinch? Or is it Waterford?
Yeah. I had a thought and now I've changed it. I'm gonna go. Actually, I've been there and I've been to 2 of them, but I could be wrong.
Yeah,
I
so
would have been bigger.
it's definitely not Hinch, right? So Hinch looks
No.
very different to that. Waterford is a huge, big metallic distillery, so it is, in fact,
Yeah,
Waterford.
because that part of Waterford is sort of, you can only really see that from the river. Technically, you know, as if you're on the tour, that part
I
of
would have
it.
thought Cooley was just much bigger than that.
Yeah,
It was between Cooley and Waterford.
yeah.
for me.
Waterford just has that the metallic outside of
you see,
it, and
what-
it's double stacked.
Waterford's an old Guinness brewery, and the old part of the brewery is still there. And so when you go beyond this building that you can actually see here, you're into the old brewery, and it's still just a very old Guinness brewery. It's fantastic looking. And what happened was that they took over the new brewery and pretty much added stills.
So how I can't see the chat, Jim.
Chat is
halfway time.
with a few. Danny Henbington is 5 for 5. Greg's Whiskey Guide 5 for 5. Graham Aitken 5 for 5. Michael Henry 5 for 5. I currently am on 4 for 5 personally.
I'm
Jimmy
5 for
Egg
5.
5 for 5. So there you are.
Nice.
I've got 2, I think. Jesus,
It's all right, Al. That's all right.
what can you do? Michael Henry, send me a fucking bottle or a sample down.
Right. So
you know?
So if anyone gets this one wrong, they weren't listening tonight. Because question 6 is, what is the oldest whiskey distillery in Ireland? And there is a banana skin. But Jim told you the answer to this earlier on tonight. Is it the Old Bushmills Distillery? Is it Kilbeggan Distillery? Or is it Jameson Distillery?
Oh shit.
I go Al's answer.
Fuck. I know I should listen to you more often, Jim. I know which is the oldest.
I'm not going to throw up my answer
It's
until Al
B.
does.
It has to be fucking B. I know which is the oldest. One on the bottle.
So
We'll
what,
go with B.
what,
we'll
what
go
did you
with
say, Al? Did you say A or B?
I said B because everybody
B.
else did.
Okay.
I wasn't listening to Jim. I was watching other stuff.
So Jameson's is pretty old. Old Bushmills Distillery was the first distillery to be given a license to distill whiskey, but the distillery was not built until much later, which makes it the second oldest distillery. In fact, Kilbeggan Distillery is the oldest distillery.
I think the thing is that if the question's asked, which is the oldest licensed distillery in Ireland, the answer becomes Bushmills.
Correct.
basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we talked about this a lot tonight. But according to Irish whiskey regulations, Irish pot still must be made from a minimum of what? 25% malted and 25% unmalted, 30% malted, 30% unmalted, 35% malted, and 35% unmalted.
Fuck, I should know this.
You should, because we talked about it for about 20 minutes tonight.
Jimmy Legg says that he doesn't think Aquaviti would stand for all this profanity. Al?
I don't. either. I am not. I do not swear very much.
Only whenever you're on my live streams.
Yeah, okay. We all knocked that out of the park. It was, of course, 30% malted and 30% unmalted. Whether it's just an Irish thing is still a bit up in the air.
That's a question for another time. We'll let Roy field that one.
Exactly. Okay, so question 8 is Method and Madness is a range of expressions from which distillery? Is that Middleton, Tullamore Dew, or Roe & Co?
Maybe we're throwing our answers up too soon. Are we leading people?
We just know stuff.
There'll be an asshat show up here. That's
We drink and we know stuff.
Oh, listen, I'm luring you into such a false sense of security. The asset's awful. Awful. I'll tell you that now. Yeah, you're all right. It is Middleton.
But just a little add on to that. Anybody who ever does the Middleton tour will be the silent distillery, the old Middleton distillery that closed in the 1970s. And that's where you will see Method of Madness distillery. Beautiful, absolutely stunning distillery in miniature.
Exceedingly expensive stuff. Though.
Yeah.
Nicholas is 8 for 8. Danny Headington's 8 for 8. We have a few 8 for 8s. Go ahead.
Good. Okay. So question 9. Good to hear there's a few 8 for 8s out there. Redeem myself from everyone sending me death threats after the last quiz I did. So question 9 is in 2018, Old Bushmills became the first distillery in the world to release a whiskey matured in what? Was that Japanese oak, Chinkapin oak, or acacia?
Oh, shit, I don't know.
That's a good question. They
Thanks
were all
very
good
much, Jim.
questions, Ben. They're all good questions, but that's one that sort of, although it would appear everybody else has gone the same way. So it's just the fact that Mizunara and Chinkapin Oak have it's knowing no, everybody's going C. So I think we're all going acacia.
Okay, and I will be right.
That's pretty good for my condition. That now.
I thought that would have thrown a few people.
I think, to be honest, if I had more time, I probably would have come up with better alternative answers, but it was thrown together quickly. So, okay, it's how many are in 9 out of 9, Jim?
They're Danny Hemberton, Greg's Whiskey Guide, Nicholas, Graham Aiken, Graham Young. There's quite a few.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
9 for 9
Michael
as well.
Henry,
I'm so sorry.
Rob Halford.
There's an asset. As I say, didn't have a lot of time, so it is a proper asset.
Nigel.
So, question 10 is the number of distilleries founded in Ireland between 2014 and 2020 is the same as. And I've tried to pull in all Jim's loves of life into the answers of this question. So it's A, the number of counties on the island of Ireland, the same as the number of points Scotland, England, Wales, and Italy have scored in this year's Six Nations, or the number of UK top 40 hits by Boyzone.
Right. 6 years. I can tell you, I can answer the first one.
The only one I know the answer to is the first one, so I'm going with A.
Yeah. C. I don't know. No, it can't be C. Boyzone didn't have that many.
I'm going to go with B, actually.
That probably is B.
What do you think the number is, out of interest?
Well, A is 36, which seems to be very high between 2014 and 2020, in my opinion. Surely there wasn't 36 distilleries open in that time, was there?
There's 32 counties.
There's 32 counties in Ireland.
There's 32.
I was
counting.
literally just Googling that, going, shit, if I got that wrong.
I was counting. Well, actually, there's 33 because you missed Rockall. But I was counting the other 3 just outside, though. But
you claiming the Isle of Man as ours, are you?
Yeah, just beside Ballyclare Airport there. It was just the thought, the fact that it just seemed very high.
Okay, well, I can't even see what you're voting, but you all know what you said yourselves. So there's 32 counties in Ireland. Scotland, England, Wales, and Italy have scored 27 points in total in the Six Nations, and Boyzone had 21 top 40 hits. And the answer is
Hey,
27.
I flipped it.
Fuck me.
So, was there any tens?
Let's see.
Not here.
Fess up, people.
No.
Bloody hell.
Jolly Rover, 8 out of 10. Might be 4 out of 10. Simon Oliver, 8 out of 10. Danny Hembden. Oh, these people were close. They were close. Nicholas, 10 out of 10. Nicholas is the first one to get it. Fair play to you. There was an awful lot of people. That ass hat question did throw them, Ben. Paddy Leather, 10 out of 10.
Thing is, it's what an ass hat's meant to be, right?
Michael Henry, first time 10, managed it in Scotch.
Go on, Michael.
Greg's Whiskey Guide, 10 out of 10. So you've pleased an awful lot of people, Ben, because, well, I mean, you're always pleasuring a lot of people. But, I mean, it's just the fact
Oh, Jesus.
Oh,
You're
that's-
not supposed to tell what goes on in the WhatsApp group.
You're giving off the elsewhere.
Let's hope my wife doesn't catch this in the replay.
and you've been a first for me.
Well, here, let's hope she does, because she fuck, you're better than my wife.
Well, apparently I was Michael Henry's first tonight. So,
You were. As we say, you've been a first for many of these folk.
oh, I'm
Um,
Greg Whiskey Guy's first as well.
Greg's Whiskey Guide. Look, there's two things could have come out of that. One, it was either too easy, or two, it's just in their wheelhouse. It's stuff that they knew.
Good.
It's only easy if you know the answers.
That's it.
That's right. Well, to be fair, Greg and Michael and they know their stuff.
They do.
You know.
And Ben, listen, very much appreciate it. Very good questions. And I honestly wouldn't have got close to anything like that. I think I ended up with a 9, in fairness, which I'm very, very pleased with. Very pleased with. Guys, it's been interesting. I mean, I'm convinced that, and thanks for hanging around. That's not a slight at those who didn't hang around. It's always appreciated to have you in. Absolutely appreciate everybody who was in the chat. Of course I do. Pardon me. It's definitely, if it was anything tonight, interesting for me is the word, because it's got me asking more questions than it answered almost tonight. I thought I knew Irish whiskey, but there was a lot of things said there tonight which have raised questions in my head, and I'm going to have to dig a little deeper. I'm going to have to scrape back a little further.
To be fair, Jim, when you started off and you did your opening monologue, it all came across as really something that you looked into and you knew your stuff. So don't be too hard on yourself. Like what came across, you made me learn a few things, and like we can always learn more. But that opening monologue that you did, and the way you brought it from the start to where it is, I was really impressed. And you know,
Wow, thank you.
you did really well, and it made me sort of think, you know, that big Harry Bollocks knows more than I do.
He didn't need the rest. There was much to talk about.
No, sure he didn't. He
He
said,
covered that much. We didn't.
Oh, here no.
We'll bring you up just to fill you up, Buttercup, to bring you down.
Here, no, listen, lads, I really appreciate it. Jimmy Legs back in with more money added to this. Jimmy, basically what's happening is you're paying for my flight to Scotland, and like, you know, I'm going over there to meet you anyway. Very much appreciate it.
I want to go to America to do the Kentucky Trail.
Fantastic fun, Jim and the fellas. Thank you so much, Jimmy. Listen, thank you for being in there as always. Gentlemen, as I say, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for I couldn't have went through. There's 2 hours 39 minutes. I've never done anything like that on my own, and I would never have done it tonight on my own. So it's very much appreciated that you were here helping me out. Ben, thank you for the quiz. Al, and not just the quiz, but just thank you for everything. Molasses Mike has also added to the ball fun. Thanks for stepping up and filling in the slot tonight, Jim. I'll always no, I'm not going to go into the joke about filling slots, but it was an absolute honor tonight to do this, and I'm so glad so many of you come in and stayed around. Gentlemen, I'll drop you into the green room if you don't mind hanging around for a while after I have said my good nights and been for a bathroom break, because you know, as you get a bit older, like I'll be back to speak to you after that. So, gents, thank you so much, very, very much appreciate it, and to all my guests tonight who couldn't hang around. Cheers, boys.
Thanks for having us.
Cheers.
Yeah, that was fun. I enjoyed that. It was interesting for me, as I hope it was interesting for you. So a happy Christopher Malloy, I think, is the first one to say it. Maybe somebody else has said it prior and I just missed it. But a happy St. Patrick's Day to you all. It's a strange, I still think it's a strange thing. I don't think anybody, I know other places in the world celebrate their Saints' Days. Of course they do, but I don't think anybody celebrates it like the Irish, and not even just the Irish, but those people who claim to be Irish. Before I go, Al, thank you, my friend. Only caught the last 40 minutes, but great fun. Al has added to the bottle fun. Listen, thank you so much. That is really appreciated. I am absolutely honored, and it was so nice. I wish Roy, said it before, I wish Roy a speedy recovery. I feel like as if I sort of stepped into the V pub tonight, but I didn't. This was, I think, was me doing my thing. Roy, I'm still convinced, I don't care what anybody says, is so much better at this than I am. But I'm so glad that you people hung around and stuck with me. It's very much, very, very much appreciated from my behalf. I will see you all soon. I hope Roy is back with you very, very soon. You guys all stay classy. San Diego or whoever it was. I'll speak to you all soon. Take care. Cheers.